Okay, so I think it is time to officially start this fantastic conversation. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Welcome officially to a Millennial conversation on creating the future post-COVID-19. This, of course, is hosted by Oando PLC, and it is in honor of Africa Day, which was just a few days ago. And it's such an important conversation for all of us to be having at this time. Even though we're talking about a future post-COVID-19, the reality is that the future is now, and we've all got to figure out a way to live and to thrive as we move forward in the new conditions that have been presented to us by the universe. So that's how we're going to go through things. Now, there is going to be a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off our first conversation. So I want you guys to understand exactly how it's going to go. I'm Folu Storms. I am your moderator for this event, and I'm very happy to be that person for this. So we're going to have a series of conversations with different millennials who are conquering and dominating their various sectors, looking at sectors from health to finance, all the way through to entertainment, arts, and culture, of course. Now, during these conversations, they will last for about 10 to 15 minutes. And through the conversations, I'm going to do my best to take at least one question from our attendees today. Hello, guys. Thank you very much for taking out the time to listen. So if you can start thinking as the conversations are going through, what questions are most important to you? And then we can filter through that, myself and your host, Oando, to figure out which question will be best posed to each person. I do want to ask the audience to please take the time as well to make sure that your microphones are muted if you are not speaking at the time, so that we don't get, filtering of random noise from different places. That's quite an important thing. So without further ado, let's remember as well the context of why we are having this conversation. 3/4 of the population of the African continent is under 35. However, whenever we are having important conversations, that age demographic seems to be missing completely from talking about our future. And we are the stakeholders really of the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. So Oando felt that it was very important for us to gather here today to talk about that. Now, they have been involved in capacity building all across Nigeria and Africa as well, through various platforms like the Oando Graduate Development Program, OGAP, which has the objective of improving Nigeria's oil and gas talent pipeline by training and developing young Nigerian graduates over a 12-month internship plan. They also do have the Oando Intern Search, which is a digital competition that gives at least one young Nigerian the opportunity to experience working in a leading oil and gas company. And there's also offline collaborations that Oando has had with various universities and communities, from the WEF Global Shapers Africa to Kenya University to Obafemi Awolowo University. I mean, they're really quite involved in this, and they really do see this as a way of making sure we, for whom we're having this conversation, that we are shifting our mindsets and beginning to think a little bit differently as to how our future will go. All right. Now, with all that being said, we are going to get ready to have our first conversation of the day. But again, let me remind you of what the rundown is for these conversations so that you know what to expect through today's session. Now, we're going to kick off with Rima Tahini, who's the director of A&R Mavin Music Global. And she will be talking to us, obviously, about music. We will be taking a look at health with Tito, Ovia, who is the co-founder and head of public sector growth, Helium Health, that has made huge strides, actually, especially in this climate and in this time. Also, at about 1:50, from about 1:50, we will be looking at arts and culture with Adenrele Sonariwo, who's the founder of Rele Art Gallery and a consultant to Ogun State Governor on culture and tourism as well. And that conversation will happen about 1:50, and about 2:10 in education. Otto Orandam should join us, social entrepreneur and founder of Slums to School Africa. And looking at film, something that I'm particularly passionate about, from 2:30, Zulu Oyibo, co-founder and film executive of Inkblot Productions, will be with us. And then finance at 2:50 with Yamo Omorege, who's the co-founder and director of growth at Bamboo. And we will look at fashion from 3:10 with Tamara Aihi, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Grey Velvet Stores. And at agriculture, we will be going over to Shola Ladoja at 3:30 p.m. He's the founder and CEO of Simply Green Limited. And we'll come back to finance at 3:50 to round up with cryptocurrency. Tomiwa Lashebikon, who's the co-founder and head of product at Buy Coins Africa. So incredibly packed time, lots of panelists in the building as well. And if you want to know more, even though I reeled out how it's going to be running, please make sure you go over to the chat. If you go over to the chat section, you will see, of course, the full timeline as it will be laid out, so you know what to expect as we move through today. Now, I'm just going to check to see if Rima is in the building. If she is, we are going to go ahead with our first conversation. Rima, are you present?
Hi, I am here. Hi, Phil.
Excellent. Hi, Rima. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with us. It is very timely, as you can imagine, because the world is going through something that we never thought we would experience in our lifetimes. But it has happened about 100 years before, and now we've got to figure out how to deal with that today and moving forward. Now, as such a major key figure in the music market, in a huge label like Mavin, to be honest with you, we would really love your take, because there are so many music events, festivals, what have you, key sources of income for artists that at the moment have been postponed or outright cancelled. And that is worrying for people who are maybe just getting into the industry or trying to figure out what the future holds. But however, we've also seen a huge resurgence of entertainment happening online. A lot of the artists have shifted their attention to entertaining an audience that's suddenly glued to the online platform. And if we look at the statistics from Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch specifically, their music and performance arts category rose by over 500%. I mean, that's astronomical. So I would like to ask you, how do you think that we can further support innovation and creativity in the music industry during this pandemic?
Sure. So yeah, definitely, like you rightfully said, the music industry, like many industries in service and entertainment, has certainly been hit pretty badly by the pandemic. And however, we've been seeing a lot of digital innovation by artists and also platforms globally. They've attempted to really help artists that have been severely hit in this period. Companies like Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music have tried a couple of campaigns to support artists, because artists, like you said, they rely heavily on bookings and live events, especially artists in Nigeria and Africa. I mean, I think we'll probably have it worse, because our streaming numbers are extremely low compared to the rest of the world. For instance, only 1 to 2% of Nigerians actually on Apple Music, right? So when you see the charts, people charting #1, it actually is not as impactful as you would think from a monetary standpoint. And so we don't even have Spotify. That's the highest paying streaming platform in the world. So
those numbers from streaming are more overseas that we're seeing than a reflection of what's happening locally.
100%. And so the African continent is actually suffering a lot. I mean, we were already lagging behind. And in this period, you see more people streaming, but it's actually not necessarily on the continent. We're still very much behind. Even the support from these streaming platforms is not as big as in other markets. Another large revenue stream that has tanked as well is brand endorsements and sponsorships, right? Aside from booking. Brands are used to traditional ways of spending their money on concerts and live events. But now that things are hard for most companies, traditional marketing budgets, we've seen it shrink in this period, and brands are scrabbling to figure out how to up their game digitally to market their product. So it's still a very steep learning curve. Brands and artists have always worked together in different markets, especially here, but you find that now everybody's hesitant to spend more money. They're still trying to figure out, okay, how does my marketing dollar translate, or naira translate into actual, ROI? So there's a lot of people are very skeptical in this period. So our artists are definitely taking a hit. So yeah, so just to answer your question, I think a couple of things that we can do to support innovation right now and creativity in the music industry specifically, and probably this applies also to other creative sectors. So yeah, so I would say first to the consumer, right? We have a huge problem with downloads, right? Consumers, we all listen to music every day. We all of us here on this call actually have our faves that we listen to here and abroad. Please stream. Really, I think that is so important. We suffer a lot from downloads. There's a lot of leakage in the music industry, as we probably all know, and I don't think that we know the gravity of it. I think this period has certainly been an eye opener for even acts like street acts like the Naira Marleys of the world, not to mention anybody, the Zlatans. You see they're very popular, but you check streaming numbers, they're quite low. And that's probably because a lot of people just download their songs and have it on their phones, right? And I think people actually don't know how artists make money aside from the fact that they get booked. It's just they know that, okay, so I download your song, I'm a huge fan. And I even see our artists get tagged on posts like, I'm such a huge fan, I've downloaded all your songs, I have on my phone. That's hurting the artist. It's extreme. Imagine every time you listen to it, if you were streaming, think about how much money the artist could make, right? But you're not streaming, you're downloading, so it's permanently on your phone. So you don't actually, the artist doesn't make any money off of that. I think it was okay before because artists were just okay with downloads because they just wanted to get popular. And that at that time, music streaming was not a thing, So now that the world has become really digital, especially now in this pandemic period, is so important. If you have Apple Music, if you can stream, even Audiomack, you don't actually have to go as far as Apple Music. There are less expensive platforms. YouTube is free. So you can stream and just share also, aside from streaming, share your faves. Some artists suffer from the fact that their fans hoard their music, especially alternative artists. We have a couple of alternative artists on the roster and they love artists, but they don't really share the music.
So let me interject to then ask in terms of support, because what we're getting, first of all, is the culture, this belief that what is online in terms of music is free. We should be able to download it. Why should we have to pay for that? So when we're looking at support, do you think that better infrastructure, better access to internet, cheaper access to internet?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, just get into that. I think that's one hand for people who can afford the internet, right? And then you then have public sector, private sector collaboration to actually make data affordable. This is a bigger, conversation. We've been on it for years. I think it's getting better, but we have a long way to go to make data cheaper. I think in this pandemic period, I don't know how, but I think that it would be important for both public or private sector to come together and work with artists, work with the music sector to actually make reliable internet and affordable internet accessible to everybody, to support the sustainability of the industry right now. Because even things like Insta Live, YouTube Live, artists are doing live concerts. The truth is that we're not enjoying the benefits of that as much as the rest of the world. Because if you go to our live streaming, like our Insta Live, artists that have like 8 million followers probably only have a couple of hundreds on their live, because it's expensive to get on live, right? And it's kind of, if you go on live, you lose a lot of your data. So people just pop in and out quickly because they can't stay on the live sessions on Instagram or YouTube. So we definitely have to collaborate to sustain the efforts right now. And then of course, you have government laws that need to be properly put into place, copyright laws that we don't really have any of that are really enforceable, right? Blogs are just allowed to put out artist music anyhow. The moment it comes out is on blogs to download freely. So if there are copyright laws like other artists enjoy in other parts of the world, I really think that it will help artists greatly. And I know this is an ongoing conversation, but we really need to work together more than ever to actually make these things possible or start, putting them into action. Because right now it's pretty detrimental to artists at the moment.
I love that you mentioned coming together, because I was going to ask you next, what role do you think listeners, viewers, fans, the millennials, people who are in on this chat right now, what role do they have to play in making sure that governments enforce laws, not just creating them, but making sure that they're enforcing them? Because again, at the beginning, we've mentioned this culture. We are the stakeholders for the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. It's our continent to do what we choose with. And I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of how much power fans truly have, and whether they are aware of the power that they have to influence and to shape the way things are progressing, and to support some of their favorite artists.
So you definitely do have a lot of power. Sharing your voice is important. This is how you support, you give back to the artist for entertaining you, you know? So I really think that if you use your platform to share their music, if you're in power in any place, any position that you can actually impact change in any of these areas, I think it's really important to take that action. And of course, artists also have a huge role to play, labels as well, to come together and actually sensitize their fans. People don't know how you make money. You need to come out and say, look, you are hurting me by downloading my song. So some artists actually need to come together to speak up more. Some are already doing it, but it's not at a large scale. And of course, corporate brands as well have a role to play in this. I think that because of traditional, like I said before, traditional events are on pause right now, brands are not endorsing as much, but I really think that you can still engage you can still collaborate with artists. You can engage them, engage their platforms, tap into their stories to tell yours. A lot of artists have bigger platforms digitally than a lot of brands. So corporate brands on digital. So I think it's important, if you really want to tap into that, you can innovate with artists, visual artists, not just musicians, right? They can create soundtracks, visual content for you, jingles, and place more value on their work as well. We tend to see that a lot of creatives are being taken advantage of. You get paid scraps for stuff that in other parts of the world, people pay a lot of money for. So I really think it's time to support your creatives, because it's really important right now for brands as well, because that's what people are doing right now. They're online.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that are coming in, and you guys can send in your questions. We have Rima for a few more minutes. Thank you very much again for your time, Rima. We have ROA who says, so are you implying that streaming a Nigerian song while abroad isn't in any way profitable to the Nigerian artist who produced or owns the song and published it on Spotify or Apple Music? So the question is whether or not the streaming overseas counts in any way. Is it profitable towards the artist in any way?
Yes, that's a really good question. It does. I mean, definitely the dream for every artist in Nigeria is to cross over, because we want your streaming numbers to go up. So you want your streaming numbers to go up. So you want to cross over, you want your music to cross over, but a lot of artists have not reached the global standard. They're very popular in Nigeria or Africa, and that's about it. Very few artists have actually crossed over. The likes of Burna Boy, the likes of Rima, have crossed over, and you find that they're streaming, or Mr. Easy, their streaming numbers are high because they're making music that sort of the diaspora can relate with, that non-diaspora can relate with. So you want to also target that as an artist in this period to help yourself. Try to make music that that can not just be, for the jaye in Nigeria, but can actually be a global hit. It's hard to tell, but try your best, because that's actually what you want to do, because that's where, streaming numbers come from. But yeah.
Perfect. Taiwa Jai asks, what do you think is the future of artist booking post-COVID?
So, sorry, can you repeat that again?
What is the future of artists booking? So booking artists, I imagine, for concerts or live events. What does that future look like in a COVID world? Because dare we say post-COVID, it's a virus. So for all we know, it's here with us for a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's going to take a while before, I guess, normal large gatherings, start again globally. All, festivals have been moved for next year, 2021. So I think, I've seen a couple of brands book artists online. There's like, come and perform for my birthday on Zoom, and then they pay you, right? Or come and do this thing. We're getting, so a lot of digital booking is happening, but of course it's not as at the scale at which booking, So I don't have high hopes for that in this year, to be quite honest. I think that we need to look at other ways to make money. We do need to figure out other ways to make money digitally, right? And as long as internet is an issue, live events online are still going to be very tricky. So I'm not 100%, it can't replace physical events, it can't. So it doesn't sound as hopeful. I wish I had a more hopeful answer. But really, that's it. I think that we just need to figure out how to be more innovative online.
Okay. We take that. There are quite a few people, Chineo, Kiri, ROA, who are again talking about the cost of streaming and the cost of internet data, which is something that Rima has addressed severally actually through this conversation. We know that it's a very big thing. And she did also say making a more concerted effort to stream or promote streaming. So I wonder, just before we let you go, in terms of engaging the artists and talking about promotion of streaming versus downloading, the education part, how much effort is being put to get the artists to be involved in that constant education? Because now we must look at it as a cultural shift. It's a mindset shift. So are there any plans in place to get artists to really try and condition their fans to be prepared for the future, so that even though that infrastructure or framework doesn't quite exist now, when it does come, they are uniquely poised to take advantage of that?
Yeah. Definitely. I think some people are doing, things here and there, but I don't think anyone has truly gotten behind a campaign, like an actual campaign to like pull artists in, pull public sector in, pull private sector in, and, just actually educate people, right? And I think you can even partner up with streaming platforms. It's a win-win situation. The more they help you tell your fans to stream, the more they also make money, you make money. So we all benefit from it. So as a label, that's something we're looking into. That's something we definitely want to try to see how we can champion it. We're definitely working on that. I think this has been a wake-up call for everybody to see just how bad our streaming numbers look. So definitely not enough is being done, and we should all do something about it.
All right. And then Oluwadamilola Akomolafe says, to build on that, I mean, we'll have to use musical musicians to help other sectors. That way, there's an actual concerted effort to help the country while improving themselves, which is absolutely true. So Rima, thank you. Is there anything else you want to share with people, especially in terms of shifting the mindset to look at opportunities, even though there are challenges? Because the music industry is a very clear example. Mavin's existing is a very clear example of where people would have said, oh, this can't be done. It's going to be super hard. Being a woman in such a high level is a clear example of that. So I wonder what you could leave people with to already get the brains and the mindset shifting in a direction that sees opportunities, even where there are challenges.
So I'd say I'll just wrap up with 3 points quickly, not to take too much of your time. I think for the artists, you have the opportunity to feed your fans more content, right? Just you have their attention. So feed them more content. I was reading a Forbes article the other day that was pointing out that in this period, there's going to be artists that are impacted and versus artists that are embraced, right? The embraced artist is the artist that is entrepreneurial and can actually take advantage of every opportunity that comes, going live, talking to your fans, calling them, like just taking that extra step, educating them. So there's that, and making songs that fit in this period. What you release actually in this moment, in this period, really matters. You can't release songs for the clubs right now. You have to think about the context where your fans are at right now. So you have to be more conscious of that and aware. So you have the opportunity, and then there's the impacted artists that would see this as a brick wall and just fold. So I really urge artists to be the embraced, evolve, try to study. It's really a marketplace. Study the trends, study what is working. What kind of music is being streamed right now? What are people gravitating towards? How does TikTok work? How does Twitch work? Don't just, say, this is not what I'm used to, so I'm just going to wait till the world gets back to normal. I don't know if everything is going to get back to normal anytime soon. So that's one. I also think there's huge opportunity for content creators to create content out there. Because interestingly, while streaming numbers globally, actually audio streaming has gone down, video streaming has gone up. We think that streaming has gone up, but it's not all streaming. Audio streaming actually globally has been reported to have gone down. And so you have to sell whatever thing you're selling, you need visual content, whether it's music, because the way we consume music has changed, right? The way we consume anything has changed. We don't commute to work anymore as we used to. So we sit at home, we want to watch, we want to be visually entertained. So really for content creators, this is the time. Try to see how you can be more innovative, work with brands. And also brands, please still try to see how you can work with artists. They're definitely catalysts for your digital, marketing still. So yeah, so those are some of the things I would say. I think these are where I see the opportunities right now.
Rima, thank you so much for sharing with us. She shared some great insight, and she really is right. Now is the time for the artists to be even more innovative, to be even more involved, and to really build that community, because you can really build your community in this time. And as they say, especially when it comes to tech, you start innovating now for what's going to hit in a few years. So thank you very much for that, Rima. Don't forget, everyone, that you can continue to chat, fill the conversation online on socials as well, at Oando_PLC is on Twitter. On Instagram, check out Oando_PLC. We're streaming live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn as well. You can find us at Oando PLC. So Rima, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Very interesting. So audio streaming numbers are down, but visual streaming numbers are up. Yes, there are challenges all over the place, but there are definitely opportunities. Now, speaking of opportunities, we're going to be taking a look at opportunities in health. We have Tito Ovia, who's the co-founder and head of public sector growth for Helium Health. I believe that Tito is right there. Hello, Tito. How are you?
Hey, Folu, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. Very lovely to meet you, as the world is now.
Lovely to meet you too.
Okay, so let's get into this conversation now. If there's anything that this time has shown us and exposed to us as Nigerians and as Africans as a whole, is that there are definitely huge infrastructural gaps, investment gaps in our healthcare sector. And it is something that we really must pay attention to, as systems across the continent are suffering from neglect, underfunding. And that, of course, is leading to a numerous number of serious health challenges. So the Helium Health, however, has been able to identify some of these challenges and provide innovative solutions. And you've been working with different state governments as well. So I would love if you would talk to us a little bit about Helium Health, the initiative, and what inspired that, and what you're seeking to achieve with Helium Health.
So Helium Health is a healthcare technology company, and our mission is to be able to accelerate Africa's transition into a better healthcare sector using data and technology. And our whole theory around that is that, different sectors such as the banking and finance sector, oil and gas sector, telecom sector, they've been able to leapfrog a lot of challenges, infrastructure challenges that they face because of technology. The idea that you're able to go to a market now and just do a transfer straight from your mobile phone, and then again, pay for your goods and walk away is not a concept that we had 10 years ago. But that ease of transferring money has allowed you and has allowed there to be access for more funding and more people, across the market for banking and finance. However, the healthcare, we've clearly seen a neglect with that. And sort of our theory back in 2016 that, how now proved right was that because people have not invested in technology, or people don't see the value of data with healthcare in Africa, and it's sort of seen as a social service, our healthcare sectors have they've been neglected across the board. So when we started Helium Health, we wanted to basically create solutions for both providers of healthcare, payers of healthcare, patients as well, that allowed them to be able to have ease of access and improve, the quality of healthcare. So the very first product we launched in 2016 was our electronic health records platform. Very simple.
Was what platform?
Our electronic health records platform.
Electronic health records. Gotcha.
Yes, our EHR. And what this basically is just, in short, digitizing a hospital's processes end to end, right? So from the very point that you walk in, then to the vital station, doctor's room, lab, pharmacy, all of that is done with our solution, plain and simple. And, the idea of it was that, of course, patients, for example, are not waiting now for like 5 minutes. I'm sure everybody has been to a hospital where they're like, oh, we can't find your file. Oh, just wait. Oh, hold on. But what's your name again? And they're going through these paper things. And again, you're not in the hospital to mingle or network. You're trying to get in and out and leave. Especially now during this era. And then of course, hospital administrators, we found that they don't actually run hospitals like businesses because of course there's not enough information and enough data around, okay, how should we invest in our hospital? For example, banks as well don't, sort of want to give financing to hospitals either because they don't understand healthcare. So again, how do we now provide them with that data for that? And then finally, state governments, which is my most favorite one, is that everyone always sort of goes on about, different governments that you don't invest in healthcare, you don't value our healthcare systems, but nobody's going to invest in something that they don't understand what's happening in the first place. So again, how do we now provide that data for them? And that in short, short and simple is what Helium Health is about and what we do. Yeah.
Okay. So what challenges in this sector at the moment do you think present opportunities, especially for millennials, to be able to take advantage of and to create healthcare systems that will work for us, maybe not even our generation, maybe our kids' generation, moving forward? What can we do in this time? And what has Helium Health been able to implement in this time towards that end?
So one of the biggest challenges that we all face, and not even just millennials, right, is that nobody ever knows where to go. Right. So nobody ever knows where to go and receive care. So, off the top of your mind, okay, you want to go to, a pediatrician, for your kids, right? Your reaction is to start calling, your friends that might have kids, or maybe even the schools that, oh, who would you recommend? And then again, that is then how you decide on the best person to go to. Even things like with, plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery, again, you go based on that. So one of the biggest challenges that we have is that people don't even know where to receive care in the first place. We see it on the news all the time that sometimes people are, run down by, or their shots, and they take them from one facility to another. And, the real question is that those facilities might not even have the necessary equipment to deal with intensive care, right, or emergency care. So one of the things is about how do we now be able to, again, Rima was talking about education, now educate and provide information about, where can you go to receive care? And that's something that Helium Health is working on creating that directory. More specifically though, to do with now like COVID-19 and what we're facing, we as a company actually launched our telemedicine platform, literally months early because of this. So a big thing we saw was that a lot of hospitals were either being forced to shut down because they had cases of COVID come in, or some were just closing down just because they were afraid. And they just didn't want a chance of, a patient coming in there and, cross infection and things like that. But they still needed to make revenue. They still needed to pay salaries. They still needed to even just attend to their patients that needed them. So we launched our telemedicine platform that allows you straight from, any device to be able to call, video call, your patients, check in on them. They can pay directly from a payment link, and just making that as smooth and as easy as possible, seamless as possible. And that was one of the real things that we really focused.
Tito?
Hello?
Yes, Tito?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Slight
sorry.
issue.
So, yes, like.
1 second, Tito, your mic is muted. There you go.
Oh, yeah, I'm back. Yeah, and then on the public side, one of the things we then did was that we then launched our, we're then helping different states' government with their COVID-19 response. Like I said, we have telemedicine solutions, we have our electronic health record solution that could help manage your isolation center. So again, how do we now customize that for different state governments to ensure that it helps them manage the COVID-19 response within the states, and basically customize that for them particularly. So that's one thing that we've seen to do. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Now, it's very interesting. We've got a comment from ROA who says, thanks for all the efforts and everyone getting together to share this knowledge and information, and says something that I find interesting. I'll put in my 2 cents, and then I'd love to know what you think. Says, in terms of creating the future, there should be a very strong focus on science and tech, and feels like in the lineup that we have of shaping the future, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of science and tech. What I would say is that tech is is not a separate thing. It's become a part of all these other sectors, because what you're talking to us about completely is technology based. It is the perfect blend, in fact, of science and technology. But I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how much more of a role tech can play in the healthcare system, and what we as millennials can do as stakeholders to make sure that we are supporting that innovation and that growth going forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, Polo, you literally said, like, the perfect statement, right? That tech is not a separate thing. And I think, when everybody thinks about tech, they possibly think about a guy with like a hoodie and like coding and like lines of code on his screen. And it's, this huge scary thing. I mean, for example, I know I'm in tech, but I technically don't count myself as in tech because it's healthcare first. Tech just enables me to be able to do my job in a more efficient way. That's what tech does. So tech is an enabler for everybody, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in banking and finance, healthcare. It always needs to be incorporated. I mean, as we can see now, everyone now has to move into like virtual meetings, right? Again, you're using technology to ensure that you can continue having your meetings and you can make sure that work gets done. And I think that that's important, that everybody in whatever you do needs to be sure that you incorporate some kind of form of technology to make sure that, of course, you're being more efficient. And it comes in ways that you don't even know how, but yeah.
I absolutely love that. So I'd also love to know, what are some of the biggest lessons for you that you think our healthcare sector can take away from this pandemic as it's come upon us suddenly, out of the blue, it seems?
So I think one of the things that this pandemic has shown us is the true capabilities of our healthcare sector. So, in everybody's mind, I don't think that there's one soul in Nigeria that didn't know that our healthcare system lacked in certain ways, right? So we all had sort of an idea that, look, we are lacking. We are definitely not the best healthcare system in the world. And, definitely resources are not being allocated where they should be for healthcare, right? And it's not seen as a need. However, the pandemic has turned that from a theory into a reality. And again, it's not just, our country. So we look at countries like the US and the UK that have some of the best healthcare systems in the world, and they are struggling with healthcare workers. We know we have a brain drain problem when it comes to healthcare in Nigeria. Again, it's something everybody talks about. So, I think that the impact is we can't even imagine us getting to those stages, and we clearly don't have enough healthcare workers. One of the things I've been talking about, with my co-founders is, we can, our state governments and our governments can buy as many isolation beds, buy as many beds, buy as many ventilators. I mean, that's money, right? You can throw money at a lot of things and your problem will be solved. However, you cannot overnight buy a healthcare workforce, human capital. You can't do it. It's impossible. Nobody can. And, I think that we need to find ways to be able to actually encourage our doctors to stay back, whether it is from tax breaks, whether it's then sponsoring, workshops, whether it's then sponsoring education, whatever it is. I think that that's something we really need to put a focus on, because you can buy, you can spring up isolation centers overnight. It's okay, like that's money, but it's important. We actually need people that are specialized. We need a workforce that wants to actually stay back and help us do this, because we're in trouble. We really are. And our best minds are literally abroad. And, it's not that we don't have the capabilities as a nation or we're not smart enough, for example. We are, because, you go to some of the best doctors in the UK or the US and they're Nigerians. They are.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So we need to basically help encourage our, healthcare workforce and basically strengthen it. Because that's one thing that will take a long time to do, and it's not built up overnight.
Okay, we've got someone in the comments who is a doctor themselves. Oluwadamilola Komolafe says, as a doctor myself, I believe that we should be able to promote as many Nigerian doctors in the diaspora as possible to, one, take the Nigerian Medical Board exams, to a concerted effort to help in different sectors of the country, for example, localized healthcare systems, schemes rather than countrywide, and that we be able to work to transform Nigeria's healthcare by encouraging expat and local doctors in various states in order to move forward in a number of ways. And how do we become doctors on your telemedicine program? Damilola also asked. So I think some of that clues into the problem that we have, where you can't just now we're in this situation. How are we encouraging our medical professionals, both home and in the diaspora, where a lot of our strength really does lie? How do we make that work for us as a continent?
Yeah, so, I have a couple ideas of that. And my own thing is you have to incentivize them. So a lot of the doctors that you see that do come back from the diaspora, they're older, right? So they've, worked their 20, 30 years in, the diaspora. They've decided to now move back and sort of quote unquote retire in Nigeria. And their retirement is the idea of either, giving back or starting up their own practice, or maybe their idea of retirement is flying back every month to Nigeria and, again, providing their services for free. However, though, for the younger doctors that are actually trying to build up a life and actually trying to, become better, how do you now incentivize them to do that? I mean, we know we can't match pay. That already is it.
There's been a quick break there.
I don't know if I'm back.
Yes,
sorry.
I think you are coming back.
Sorry.
So we spoke about not being able to match pay.
Exactly. Where we can't match pay. But again, are there other ways that, you can then want to bring them back? Is it by possibly, making whether it's the board exams, shorter or anything like that, making them more available so they can take them abroad and come back? Are there schemes that you can now help them do that? Are there tax breaks you can give them as well for wanting to come back? Again, it's for government to think about them to be able to incentivize them, because it's just not there. That's why nobody wants to do it.
Yeah. So I think somebody else is now asking, how can developers get into Helium Health? And I'm going to just tag on to that. Does Helium Health have any plans to include health education in there somewhere in this tech space, seeing as we are trying to share knowledge, incentivize, encourage people, and just kind of share the practice so that it benefits our communities here on the continent or in the diaspora?
So we have a lot of investors, international investors, and quite a number of them are angel investors abroad, and top doctors and John Hopkins. And one of the things that we've actually raised funds for and we talked about is how do we now sort of include a form of education to this, right? How do we then sort of connect universities and medical schools here in Nigeria with the top medical schools around the world? Ensure that there is a direct link and sort of being sort of the synergy and part of that. So that's definitely something that is in our pipeline. We definitely haven't worked out the kinks yet for it, but we are definitely in the perfect position to want to be able to do that, because all the time we get doctors from abroad asking, oh, we want to do things back in Nigeria, but we just don't know how, and we don't know where to go. So definitely,
And still on that, Ike Osaki, do a big shout out to Ike. Thanks for joining us. Actually asked whether or not if it is possible at this time for Nigerian medical board exams to be taken online, so that people overseas who are curious or interested in helping out back home can begin to start to make that move into minimize the downtime of coming home just to sit physical exams.
I don't believe they are online yet. So again, this is something that we're talking about. And I think given, again, COVID-19, the pandemic, this is now something that they're going to have to revise if they want to encourage people to come back. Most definitely. And thank you. Good point. Most definitely. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think we've pretty much come to the end of this particular session, but I think, Tito, just before I let you go, I would love for you to just share with us what you think the future is going to be, at least when we say future, short term, let's look at the next few months in healthcare in the country, and possibly the next 1 to 2 years. What is this going to shape up like? Because at the moment, we've seen the ease of lockdown, and I think this specifically obviously concerns the healthcare sector. On the one hand, there are some practitioners who are really worried about the potential burden that will be placed on the healthcare system, considering factors like the rate of infection of COVID-19 and that sort of thing, and how unknown and how novel it really is to the human race. And, juxtaposing that with the realities of living in a place like Nigeria, and I'll use Nigeria as a case study, where people are like, man, we have to go. I've not seen anything happening. Nobody's going down. Let me be working, So as somebody who's uniquely placed in that field and seeing what's happening, what are your thoughts?
So I know there's a huge debate about, pro-lockdown, anti-lockdown. And the truth is that our economy really can't, afford a lockdown. We actually can't. I mean, with the price of oil tanking and everything like that, like we can't do it. However, though, at the same time, we do need to find ways in which we actually be able to beef up and scale up our response. So we need to be more creative. Where other countries might not necessarily need tech or want tech, we now have to do that and invest in those things. I think that we're going to see, in the next couple months and next couple years, because I believe COVID is going to be around for a while, is that everybody is going to sit up when it comes to healthcare. Healthcare is not going to be something that comes, in the back of your mind that, oh, we haven't done the budget for our healthcare system. Okay, let's just do this. Do something last minute, right? It's going to be something that comes first because nobody wants to be put in this position again. I mean, everybody is sweating, right? Because this affects everybody across the board. And again, it's just that if simple things were done in the very first place. So I think that, in the long term, healthcare is not going to be sort of seen as a social service or, coming, second to last or anything like that. It's going to always come first. People are going to think about it. But now we will definitely feel the brunt of things. Things will be hard for a while. There definitely will be, the case numbers will definitely increase because, again, we're a densely populated country. However, though, I think it's something that we just have to be able to be more creative about our response. We have to know, okay, how do we want to manage these people? How do we now get out the world and let people actually know that COVID-19 is real? So yeah, I think we're in for a ride, really.
In for a ride. I like that you said that. It does feel that way. I'll chip in one more question that's come in from Ibrahim Suleiman, who a big shout out to Ibrahim. He says, self-medication is a huge challenge here as well. And that are there, campaigns that we can push to warn people against the dangers inherent, especially now where in this climate, a lot of people are very concerned about going into healthcare establishments, institutions. They don't want to be in a space where they think there's a higher chance of them contracting COVID-19.
So the thing is, I'm a bit on the fence about self-medication, and this is because a lot of people don't actually have access to a facility that they can go to see a doctor and actually be prescribed a form of medication. People might have to go miles, or it's a whole day's journey or anything like that, whereas their local pharmacist on their road, they can go there and get something and be treated. And a lot of times this has actually helped people's lives. This is the reason why you can get antibiotics over the counter, malaria medication over the counter, purely because of that. Not saying that there aren't dangers to self-medicating, there definitely are. And I think that we need to be able to see, okay, how do we now strengthen our community healthcare workers, right? So this is where the government comes in. How do we now ensure that, we have a sense of community healthcare workers that go around hard to reach communities that don't have healthcare facilities to ensure that, people can get the care that they need and the education they need. So they themselves are not just popping antibiotics because, they started sniffling. It's very important. Yeah.
Okay, Tito, this has been such an enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for your time on this. One last thing, I've said one last thing 3 times, so apologies.
It's fine, it's okay.
But it is quite engaging. I do wonder, again, I'm going to repeat this question quite a lot for everyone listening in terms of mindset shifts. How should people be pivoting right about now, especially those who are in the healthcare sector? And somebody did point out that you didn't answer about developers getting involved in the platform in Helium Health. So those 2 things, mindset shifts so that we're looking at opportunities and developers being able to get involved with Helium Health.
So I believe that we're currently hiring right now. We've been hiring like crazy during this period in time. I think we are looking for more developers. So if you go on our website, there's definitely a careers button somewhere down there. So that you click on it, there's a form you fill. And I think the direct email is like careers@heliumhealth.com. So feel free, or team@heliumhealth.com, and you can reach out to us because we really are trying to, scale up. But yeah, so sort of healthcare workers, I think everybody just needs to be able to take their own protection into their own hands. I think that this is just something in general, right? Definitely the government is trying and they're, advising people wear masks and things like that. But you yourself must actually be conscious about, okay, am I wiping down things? Am I changing my mask? Am I changing my gloves? How am I dressed? Before I walk into my home and I've been treating people, do I go somewhere and dump all my clothes and then change? I mean, every time I go out of the house and I come back, because I've been going to different healthcare facilities, my mom makes me jump in the swimming pool to sort of like cleanse everything.
Your mother is focused. Your mother is focused.
She's very focused. She's very focused, and she does not want to die young. And shout out to her because it's her birthday today. But yeah,
happy birthday.
Yeah, but so basically I think that we have to look at that, and for other businesses, you generally have to look at being remote first, so doing that and saying, okay, is there anything that we can do remotely before we go in person? And I know it's hard for a lot of people, but minimize your contact, just be very conscious about being around other people and where they're coming from, and just social distancing. So if your reaction is to hug somebody, hug yourself instead.
Right. Tito, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so
much. Everyone
much.
who's just joined, welcome to the conversation. It is a millennial conversation on creating the future post-COVID-19. It is hosted by Oando PLC. Don't forget, of course, to follow them on all social media platforms. They are absolutely everywhere. If you go into our chat section right here in this conference, you'll be able to see all the different ways that you can hook up with them online. But now it's time to switch lanes. We have looked at healthcare, we have looked at music. We're going to go more into arts and culture now. And to talk to us about that, we've got the fantastic Adenrele Sonariwo, who's the founder of Rele Arts Gallery, and she's a consultant to the Ogun State Governor on Culture and Tourism. Adenrele, thank you for joining us. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. I have to say I'm a fangirl who's never officially spent time with you. So to me, this is particularly exciting. And just before this segment, for those of you who don't know, Adenrele has created history in so many different ways with what she's done in the arts and culture segment, especially. And I think it's someone who very much exemplifies shifting mindsets and finding opportunities where everyone else says, we don't know how you're going to make money doing this. What does this mean? So I'm going to jump into that conversation with you. As usual, people, please don't forget that you can send us questions. We'll try to address as many of those questions as possible. Now, in terms of, let's set the scene, positioning the mindset of what's happening right now. You see, according to UNESCO, over 128 countries have already closed down all their cultural institutions. Tourism is at an all-time low right now, but we still today cannot deny the importance, especially mentally, of a community that is engaged in art, that is engaged in culture. And so I just sort of wonder, in terms of the availability of artistic and cultural content and how it contributes to mental health, what would you say, Adenrele, are the short and long-term impacts of the current crisis on tourism, arts, and culture, looking at the Nigerian case study?
Okay, well, first, thank you for having me, and thank you for such a kind introduction. I think the short-term impacts are very obvious, right? So, as you mentioned, a lot of the cultural institutions are closed. Even as a gallery, we had to close as well. And what that means is that it reduces there literally is nobody coming into your space, so you're not engaging with people. You don't know what sales would look like. You don't know if you're still going to be able to exist even after COVID. And even when I listen to some of the webinars and seminars that have just been going on around, the museums are closing as well. And most of them obviously rely on ticket sales, for instance, to be able to operate. So there is that. So the short-term impact is very obvious. It means that, people are nobody's traveling, right? Nobody's patronizing hotels or tourist attraction. In Ogun State, we had to close. All our tourist attractions are closed as well. But what I think this does is, because I like to see opportunities, right? And I think that what it does is it gives us an opportunity to really pause, right? Even when you think about the lockdown, when people go out, they're sort of enjoying their environment more, right? So you take a walk and you say, oh, I didn't know Lagos could be this, quiet. Yes. So you're really getting a chance to really appreciate the art around you, the culture around you, even with the gallery, right? So we've always had a very digital strategy. We've always been online and socially, very social media savvy. And so for us, that meant that we could still engage with people online. And as I mentioned, it's such a beautiful time because people are not necessarily going to work. They're not, they're working from home, from the comfort of their home. And we are seeing that they're paying attention more. So they're going online to look at our artists, to ask questions. We're even getting people buying, which is a bit, we're kind of confused. So April, May, we had the most amount of people that had, requested from, whether it's through Etsy or a website or Instagram, and we're like, what's going on here? Why are we seeing such a spike in people being interested in our artists? So I think even though it's the short-term impact is that there's a reduction in people going into spaces, I think it provides an opportunity for you to become more innovative and try and push out your content through a digital platform.
That's such an important thing that you pointed out, which a lot of people will not be aware of, because so many more people are spending time in their home environment, at home, and for the foreseeable future, even as now the lockdown is easing and as things are going to return to a kind of normal, the reality is human beings are going to be spending more time sequestered in their homes. So this idea of having art and culture in your space, or curating your space so that it feels inspirational, so that it does something for the mind, which is then what you've now seen as an upspike in terms of sales, which is phenomenal. And I wonder as well, in terms of distribution, getting the art from point A to point B, that sort of thing, any sort of opportunities there, because people who may be curious at being involved in the arts and culture world, may not know what all the roles are that they could play, or how they could get involved in that. And I wonder if there's anything you wanted to say on that.
I mean, for us, so we're making, even though we're getting the inquiries and we're making the sales, it's we can't deliver yet, right? Because at the point in which we were seeing the spike, there was the total lockdown, especially in Lagos. I think, they were still able to move around a bit. But in Lagos, there was a lockdown. And so, we want to keep our team safe. We want to make sure that, they're safe. So I wouldn't want to expose them to any of those to going out. And then a lot of people were also reaching out to us internationally, and I'm like, well, we want to be able to get your work to FedEx, to DHL, but we're not able to do that now, and we're finding that they were able to, I've always been I want to see art, I want to feel art before I buy, right? But, when we think about people that are buying out of the comfort of their home or internationally even, it's they don't necessarily, they're connecting to something that I don't see, or they only see. But what it then means for us is that as the lockdown is easing now, we're able to deliver to those people. We're able to, and the DHL, FedEx are open, so we're able to ship to them and all that. But also keeping in mind that the team has to be safe and they have to follow all the guidelines with that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, we are looking at several organizations around the world, such as UNESCO, with the support of Google Arts and Culture, having online exhibitions. And even here on the African front, the National Arts Festival, in partnership with Digital Lab Africa, is also scheduled to showcase the first of its kind digital arts festival. With the whole world, really focusing a lot more on digital, what are some of the innovative solutions that you think can be put in place for the sector to stay afloat? Until things stabilize a bit?
You just mentioned it. So even with Google Arts and Culture, we had actually signed up with them in 2016, right? And just been taking our time, being slow about everything, until this year when we realized that we actually need to put content on there. And so we spent the whole of I think it was 2 weeks ago, the team, we had a call with Google, and we just spent the whole 2 weeks just putting in content in there. And what it meant for us as a team, as I said earlier, this is such the challenges are there, but this is such a really important moment to sort of reflect and sort of reinvent, right? So we started looking at our exhibitions beyond so if you had come to the physical space and you have experienced the exhibition, even now when you see it online, you're seeing a different dimension to it. We're finding connection, we're fusing artists together. And that's what the Google platform did for us. So it's not just, we're not just dumping content, it's allowing us to rethink and be creative about the way in which we put out the content. And so, if you go to Google Arts and Culture now, we've been able to design, I think, about 9 or 10 exhibitions, going back since we started in 2015, right? Being able to bring back that content and redesign it and reimagine it and then place it on the platform and have people engage with it. And even with Open State as well, we have so many festivals. We're a festival state, so we have so many festivals that happen throughout the year. It's how do we begin to document that festival. Because the truth of the matter is that nobody really knows what the future is going to look like, right? And
Yes.
so if, for instance, we can't have those festivals anymore, you know, where do we have it? Have we put them online in a very safe space where people from all around the world can see it? But then I also say that if the world returns back to normal, right, it also allows people to see what we have. And when that time comes, they can, you know, come and visit us. So it's a win-win, you know, to just make sure that you're able to bring your content in a fresh way onto those sort of platforms.
Yes. Now, Adenrele, we had been talking earlier about the realities and the challenges across Africa of the price of data, people accessing and being able to sit online for extended periods of time. And none of the sectors are exempt from that, because at the end of the day, a large portion of the continent that we're looking at and really addressing and talking to don't have the level of access that some of us, a lot of us who are actually even sitting on this conference call can, you know, have. And I wonder, you know, taking a wider look at the sector, looking at the artisans, everybody that sort of makes up the arts and culture sector, I wonder what the future looks like for the not famous sculptor. Not everyone can be, you know, Ifeju Alatishe, for example, you know, and I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's a very fantastic question or point. And for me, I think that because I also work in Ogun State, and I always tell people that when you think about Ogun State and you think about Lagos, like you guys are living large in Lagos, right? Because Ogun State, as you mentioned, like a huge population don't even have smartphones, they don't have data, they don't have anything. And I work closely with the people in the Adenrele market, for instance. And for me, some of the things that we've been thinking about is that how do we begin to get, so there are over like 200 shops in there, for instance. Like, how do we get those people on an online platform? So that's something that we're
empower them.
Yeah, because for me, I wear a lot of Adenrele, even before Ogun State, I wear a lot of Adenrele, and I'm like, people see me and ask me, oh, where can I get it from, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, we need to figure out, you know, some sort of structure that allows this Adenrele sellers, you know, to be able to connect them, you're right, to be able to bring them onto a platform. And that's something that we're really, really working with as I speak to you right now. Having those over 200 people onto a platform. We're talking to the company that is in charge of it. And for me, I'm like, you know, I have to remind you that, as you said, they don't have data, they don't have phones, they can't, in terms of the logistics and all that. So whether we have to teach their children or they help people that work around them, the young people around them, to be able to do that for them, or you have to come on board and, you know, do that for them. So we're working out the logistics around that, knowing that, you know, they need the help. It's not something that they're going to be able to do themselves. And we're working really hard in being able to connect. And that's the way I think about it, whether it's in fashion or in clothing or anything that has to do with culture. How do we create a mechanism that connects them to people that are willing to buy, whether internationally or nationally? You know?
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. So we've got a digital artist, Ibrahim Suleiman says, you know, as a digital artist, I worry that we don't get the traction of sale of prints that conventional galleries give traditional painters. Is this something that exhibitions can look at?
Totally. You know, I was even on a call earlier yesterday, you know, talking about sort of opportunities for digital artists and all that. I think that, well, in our own little way, we do support artists that explore their work with technology. But I think that, you know, more institutions need to be open to that. And I find that with artists like that, the opportunities might not exist for you here locally, but you also have to look beyond your local environment and see what sort of opportunities exist for digital artists, whether it's internationally or within the continent even. There are institutions that actively promote those sort of arts, they collect even, you know, so you might not find it in your immediate environment, so you have to do a bit of research to see what other sort of institutions can appreciate it. But in our own little way, we try to support.
All right, I like that. And of course, just to round up in terms of questions and people, if you have any further questions for Adenrele, please do send them to us. Now more than ever, people are really aware of their mental health, and more people, you know, are really paying attention to it. So what opportunities are there potentially between the health and the creative industry, and looking how those two can connect as well?
Just going back to what I had mentioned earlier in terms of like being able to just take a breather and appreciate your space and things around you. I think that in itself is a really good first step. And also, with art and all that, we find that, there's studies around it in terms of how, art can really improve your mental health. Working in Ogun State, for instance, I pushed to make sure that we had some paintings in the isolation centers because, I can imagine that you're there, you're lonely, and you just want to be able to have a vibrant, you want to have a vibrant space around you where you can just read some encouraging words or see pictures. It doesn't have to be like dull or white walls or anything, or just plain, So doing that for me was really important because there are studies to show, the correlation between mental health and the creative sector. So little things like that, I think really help.
Fantastic. Adenrele, thank you so much for spending time with us. I do believe we've come to the end of your session. Let me not drag it too much. But finally, actually, sorry, we do have one more comment from Dr. Akomolafe, who says, I believe that art and culture plays such an important role in educating the population on the richness of their culture and heritage. And while tourism is important, I think that during lockdown, perhaps we could move a little bit more to the visual side in terms of documentaries or language lessons, storytelling, and we could that way breed an element of self-awareness, pride, and nationalism that Nigerians seem to be missing in the later generations. Any comments on that?
I agree, totally. Again, speaking to just the sort of history and culture that we have in Ogun State, trying to get them onto this like digital platform where people can appreciate it. We have this festival that would have actually, the Ojude festival that would have actually, it would have taken, if not for COVID, it would have happened during the Ramadan, at the end of the Ramadan period. And I remember looking at the pictures and the videos from the year before, so vibrant, our culture is so beautiful. And it's like, we're not able to do this, but imagine if we could put that online and people could appreciate it, they could read stories about it, generations to come can appreciate it. Whether, as I said, whether we do it again or not, generations to come can see it and appreciate it. And I'm really, really excited about the sort of art that will come out of this period. People are going to make movies from this period. People are going to make paintings from this period. So it's a really exciting time. I know there are challenges, but I'm really excited about the sort of art that this period is going to inspire.
Adenrele, thank you again so much for your time. It's been very interesting and enlightening. Thank you so much. So there you have it, sharing with us a lot of great information about arts and culture and the opportunities, because you have to remember there are opportunities. Yes, challenges, but definitely opportunities. Up next, we are going to be switching lanes. We have spoken about a little bit about healthcare. We've talked about arts and culture. We've looked at music. We're going to talk education next, all right? Education's coming up next. Otto Orandam Otto is in the building with us, I believe. And Otto is a social entrepreneur as well as the founder of Slum to School Africa. Otto, how are you doing?
Good to be here, Folu. The pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, an absolute pleasure to have you here. I know that we've been talking about all these different sectors, but at the base of that, I believe education lies right there. So it's quite important that we're having you in on this chat. For everybody who's just joining us, welcome. This is a Millennial Conversation, looking at a future post-COVID-19, or as I like to say, during the COVID-19 era, because I think this era is here for a little bit of time still. Now, when we look at education of all regions, Sub-Saharan Africa has one of the highest rates of education exclusion, with over 1/5 of children in school ages between 6 and 11 are out of school, followed by 1/3 of the young people between the ages of 12 and 14. And according to UIS data, almost 60% of young people between the ages of 15 and 17 are just simply not in school. And the biggest educational challenges for Africa have remained access and the quality of education. Now, you launched Slum to School Africa, and you gained a lot of popularity and awareness for this project that you've been on, trying to bridge that education gap. So I wonder, first of all, what your motivation was, especially in a situation that to many seems so hopeless, and many people just threw their hands up and say, I beg, I can't keep myself, And I just sort of wonder, why did you get into this, and why are you in this path right now?
Okay, thanks for the question. Really interesting, and I think we still have a lot of grounds to cover. It seems we are pretty known, but when we look at the depth of the challenge, I think we're just scratching the surface. And I think for myself and a lot of a lot of people out there. It's a very critical concern that bothers us. Now, why did we, get started in the first place? If we look at the global perspective and we look at the growth rates and the way the population increases across the world. Now, let's take a look at some of the biggest or the most populous nations in the world. You have the likes of China. China has about 1.2 billion. You have India. India has about 1.1 billion. And when we look at where Nigeria is and the projections in the next 30 years, data tells us that we're going to be the third most populous nation. So we're going to surpass the likes of Pakistan and Brazil and the United States. And when we look at the landmass of these countries, so when we look at the landmass of China, of the United States, of Brazil, of India, and when we look at the landmass of Nigeria, there's something that's very obvious, that we are a huge nation in terms of population with a very small landmass. And you know what happens as our population increases, urban migration also increases. So everybody wants to come to the urban center because that's where opportunities lie. And in our own case, we see what's happening in Lagos. Data tells us that over 100 people come into Lagos every hour. And so before this virtual conference is done, probably the lockdown is still on. But even with the lockdown, people are still migrating, And so when they come into cities like this, what happens? They don't have access to good housing. They don't have access to resources. They want to make ends meet. And so the easiest place and the fastest place for them to go to are slums. And so you see that there's a huge rise in urban slums. And when we look at what's going on, it's very difficult for education to even get access in such communities. Now, the people who migrate, and majority of households, the only opportunity they have to get their children educated is through public education. And whilst we could say Lagos State has done really well compared to every other state in the country or majority of the other states in the country, it's still way backward in terms of what we should be delivering as a quality education that children should get to prepare them for the future. And so this for us was a very major concern. When we look at major slums in Lagos from the likes of, Bariga, Ajegunle, we have Makoko, even right here on the island, we have places around Ikota, we have places around Aja. And these are densely populated communities, densely populated slums. And it's going to continuously rise because data has told us that we are the fastest growing nation in the world. Now, when you look at data from UNESCO and the World Bank and many other Bureau of Statistics, you'll find out that we have the highest growth rates in the world at 2.5%, which means that we're way faster, we're growing way faster than even India, which is the second at 1.2. So I think it's an urgent call for us as a nation to rethink the future that we want to deliver to the next generation. And education is very pivotal. I've heard everyone talk about very important industries and sectors, but without education, we really would not have the human resource and the human capacity to get people prepared for this sectors. And so the question really, the urgent question for us is how are we ensuring that every young person, every learner, every child is given an opportunity to have an equal access to quality education that prepares him or her for the future.
Mm. So I would like to know that now, how is Slum to School trying to ensure that, these learners who you're trying to give this opportunity to, they don't miss out in this time? Because we know that a lot of the private schools are doing, there's distance schooling, there's online, but again, we are not exempt from the reality of access to internet, cost of data, streaming. What can be done to ensure that really the bulk of our young minds are educated to a quality that will benefit all of us in the long term? Because this nation is made up of everybody, and making sure, as you said, that all these people have access to quality education is pivotal in ensuring the continued survival and the thriving of Nigeria and the African continent.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think before I even speak about what Slum to School is doing, because to be very fair, we are a social enterprise, and there's a very little extent to which we can scale, especially when it comes to education. Education is a right. the fundamental right of everybody, every young person. And it's the basic responsibility of every government to ensure that its citizens get the best education. And so it's important that we also put some level of pressure on our governments to make them understand that it's a priority to invest in education. You know, education must be free. And what we see in Nigeria today, we say it's free education, but it's not. It's subsidized education. And subsidized because you still have children who go to public schools and pay all kinds of fees, from toilet fees to sports fees, to inter-house sports, to all kinds of, you know, ridiculous fees are being paid across the country. And most parents from, you know, the lowest level of the pyramid can't afford that. But besides those fees, you still have things like school books and school bags and school sandals and school stockings. And tell me, if a mother has not been able to provide food for the child, where does she get the money to buy uniforms and books and bags? And so you see that the number of children, the data you had presented at the beginning of this, you know, this session clearly tells us why that data is there. You know, a huge number of young people who are out of school. And as we keep going down, you know, there's a funnel. You see that we have a huge number of young people out of school. And then from those who get into school, as they keep coming down or going up, they keep dropping. And so the data also tells us that over 60% of young people between the ages of 14 and 17 would never get access to education. And that's 1 in every 2 persons.
Oando, there's something very important that you mentioned at the beginning, where you talked about, you know, the rest of the general public creating pressure almost on the government to ensure that certain things are done. And I really like us to go down in that direction, because I wonder whether or not you think that, you know, millennials, Generation Y, actually are aware of this education problem, whether they see it as a real problem, or whether there is a separation because of, in terms of opportunity. Is it just a privileged way of looking at the world where you forget that this is important to put pressure on a government to be involved in? Because whenever Slum School is mentioned or your work is mentioned, you know, you guys are seen as exceptional people, therefore indicating that the rule of thumb is a lot of people are not putting the pressure that needs to be put there.
Yeah, I think we were all born into a society that made us fight for basic survival, right? Everyone just wants to survive. You know, we were born into a society that tells us that when you get 3 hours of power in a day, that's a great opportunity, because some people would not have it in a week. And so we grew up knowing what is wrong to be almost normal, right? And so I wouldn't blame a lot of, you know, my peers, because we are all still at that journey towards getting our basic survival. And I think it's important that we also start believing that we can achieve much more than just surviving. We can achieve much more than just thriving, you know, because at the end of the day, what matters is the legacy we leave and the future we are passing on to the next generation. And you see, it affects us in so many ways. And that's why it's even difficult for a lot of us to want to get into politics or want to get into government, you know, because the notion of that ecosystem has been so polluted. And whenever it's mentioned, it scares us, you know, it disgusts a lot of people. And so I think it's going to take a lot for us to start changing that narrative, because that's the only place where change can really begin and scale. Okay.
But how do you think we can start to adequately prepare this younger generation for the future, to act boldly, to act swiftly, so that we're not confined to the margins of global economic activity? Because unfortunately, if we don't catch up relatively soon, or at least start taking an active role in this, that's where we're going to stay.
I totally think that that's where, you know, advocacy has a lot to play. You know, there's a lot we could do with advocacy. There's a lot we could do with having conversations like this and ensuring that we keep advocating for improved policies that will ensure that everyone gets you know, a basic education. You know, the reason why we can even make informed decisions to a certain extent is because of the level of education that we had gotten. There are so many parts of the North where they have a huge number of votes, right? But the quality of the decisions they make influencing the larger part of the country. You know, when you measure it, you find out that a lot of people who are really not educated and do not know the importance of certain economic decisions they are making with their votes and how it affects the larger nation at you know, the nation at large. And so I think education is very critical, and it's important that we keep advocating, we keep, you know, having sessions that emphasizes its importance. We need to ensure that government also prioritizes, you know, the quality of education. I've not seen when money is being borrowed to invest in education, you know, invest really in education. We have one of the when we look at education infrastructure, when we look at the quality of teachers, when we look at, you know, the depth of the curriculum, when we look at even how technology is being used to get learners to be actively prepared for the future, there's very little investment that's made in that sector. And there's so much that needs to be done around policy, because the quality of the teachers we have who are even teaching our learners is one of the lowest. And I will give a very clear example. When someone wants to study medicine, he has to get about 240 to 250 in his or her JAM, but I'm talking about in Nigeria. When you want to study engineering, you need to score about 280, maybe 180 and above. Accounting, you know, law and the rest, you have to score about 180 and above in JAM. But for you to get to a college of education to study, to become a teacher, you need to score between 80 and 100. And you get admission to study to become a teacher. And now these are teachers who are preparing young people for the future. And so what it tells you is that education is not priority for us in our country. So two things are very critical. We are living in a country that doesn't have a very clear vision. And without a clear vision, you can't drive people towards a certain direction. And so everyone is trying to survive. That's why you see there's a lot of disunity, there's a lot of turmoil. People are not, you know, concerting their efforts and their energy towards a certain goal. And I think education plays a very vital role, and it's important that we always try to emphasize how important it is and push our governments towards prioritizing it.
All right. Thank you for that. So we've got a few questions / comments for you, Otto. ROA, thanks you for being here and wants to understand a bit better about your projects and the work that you're doing to boost sub-Saharan education. And of course, with the intention of potentially supporting the project. So for anyone else who's watching this, that's interested in that, how can they get in touch with you in that regards? And what are the things that you're doing?
So back to your question, initially, there's a lot we are doing, and of course, funding plays a major role as well in how wide you can scale, and we are hoping that we can also scale a lot of our interventions. Now, one thing I've seen is, you know, we say intelligence is almost evenly spread, but opportunity and access isn't. And so you find out that lots of young people who live in underserved communities lack certain privileges and opportunities that we have. And over the last months, what we've been working on is building a virtual learning program, which we, interestingly, we started working on this at the new innovation hub we have here in Lagos before the pandemic. And so what we're looking at doing is getting digital devices to learners across our communities. And so we're building cluster learning programs and virtual learning programs. We are setting up a virtual classroom at the hub, which will basically almost be like a physical classroom, but only that we have to see the kids virtually on the big screens on the walls. And so the kids have been excited about it. We're looking at starting the launching in June and reaching about 1,000 children through the virtual learning and the cluster learning for the first phase. But we believe that this really is the future, because when we see the number of young people who are out of school and the number of school buildings we should be building to get no matter how much is being borrowed, we can't build those amounts of schools. And I'll give a very clear example. Lagos is a very forward-thinking state. And like I always say, it's way ahead of every other state in the country in almost everything, even the COVID numbers. But then, in the last 10 to 20 years, Lagos has built less than 20 new schools, right? it's built less than 20 new schools. So if we look at 13.2 million children based on the 2017 data who are out of school in Nigeria, the question is, how many schools would we build? And so blended learning is really very critical. How can we ensure that children can start learning remotely? You know, education and schooling are two different things. And it's important that we understand that children can get lots of knowledge and lots of education without necessarily being in the four walls of a classroom. And so how can technology help us begin to innovate to ensure that children are learning, young people are learning, and we don't just count quality education as someone who graduates from the university with a certification in law? Because that same pyramid, data tells us that only 10 to 15% of people or young people who write JAM get access to get admitted into any university. And so what happens to the other 80% of people of young people who can't get access to universities? Our technical colleges have been seen as a second level or a third level, less than, so when someone says I'm going to a technical college, he or she is given that inferiority, look, oh, you're not, you're getting a HND, you're not getting a BSc. And so lots of people feel that quality education is only when I have a BSc, whereas in so many parts of the world, you have a plumber who is earning so well, you have a firefighter who is earning so well, you have a technician, you have all kinds of blue-collar jobs that are very prestigious. And so there's a lot we have to do with our educational policy and ensuring that we give everyone, please go on.
Oh, apologies for that. I cut you off right at the end. There's a tiny bit of lag here. Nigerian internet, we're handling it. But there are a couple of questions, and I want to get to those and comments just before we round up this session to go into the next one. Chinyere Okiri says, sorry, Mr. Otto, how do you intend to achieve the virtual learning with the children? Are they going to be provided with the devices? I'm just trying to get my head around that. So I think that's a pretty good one.
Thanks for that question. We're going to have all that information in public. So by the first week of June, please look out for that. And so we're providing digital devices. We have laptops, we have tablets. We're hoping to increase the number of tablets, and there are pairs where 2 or 3 kids in certain neighborhoods are going to use one tablet, or 15 kids, 10 to 15 kids in one neighborhood can use one laptop with one of our community teachers. And so there are cluster learning and virtual learning programs. We have partnerships to provide data for those devices and also reduce the quantity of data they will consume on certain platforms. In terms of power, we're looking at building power kiosks where they can charge the devices. There is no power in those communities, and also you have access to solar technology to improve that. There are lots of programs, there are lots of I would say the team is working a lot to ensure things that have to do with screen time, concerns around thefts, and basically every issue that we would probably arise from the use of this, new way of learning is being addressed. And if you definitely want to be part of this, we are open to working with you. We're open to learning more. We're open to collaborations, and we definitely want to see how every child, one of the things we've learned is when you put a child in a classroom and you put a blackboard or a white marker board, and you start teaching the child A, B, C, D, E. And when you give a child a digital device and the child is watching or playing through a game, the child learns over 200% faster than what we call the regular way of learning. And so I think technology has a huge way of influencing the way learning is. I think it also has a way of fast-tracking learning. Because I always say, I see no reason why children will have to spend 6 years in primary school learning what they could spend 5 years or 4 years learning. Same thing with the secondary school. I see no reason why a child, we put 50 children in a classroom and they must learn the same thing and go through the same automated structure of learning where someone could get a certificate today in 6 months, and he or she is earning much more than what a lawyer would spend 6 years would be earning. So I think there's a lot we need to do to revolutionize the way that that education is being delivered. And technology plays a very huge role in helping us achieve that.
So Otto, thank you so much for your time. Just before we let you go, can you please share with people how they can get in touch with you, how they can reach you, especially, because a lot of our attendees do want to make actual physical change and want to be a part of that. So how could they help out in the education sector with Slum to School?
You could follow us on social media pages. Mine is my name, Otto underscore Orandam, I think. Slum to School is slum number 2 school. My email is same, otto.orandam@slumtoschool.org or at gmail.com. If you follow me on Instagram, I think I'll be able to respond to you. But you can also reach out to us. Our website has email addresses, contact numbers, and phone contacts numbers, email addresses, and everything. So to be a pleasure to collaborate with every one of you. And also you can volunteer. There's a huge room for everyone to make an impact.
Excellent. Orandam, Otto, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Again, I've got to welcome everyone who's just joining us. If you're just tuning in, we're having the Millennial conversation on the future post-COVID-19, and of course, how we even get to that future. Looking at and talking with millennials who have made huge impacts in their different sectors, from the healthcare sector, where we've seen how they've worked very closely with governments, of course, and of course the pandemic has shown up, and now we're seeing how important that is, to arts and culture with Adenrele, Sonariwo, sharing with us different ways that we can innovate in this time. Now we're going to switch lanes and talk about my favorite area. Let's talk about film. We have Zulu Oyibo in the building with us. She's going to be sharing which a lot of you will have seen, or definitely have seen the adverts up on Netflix. So Zulu, welcome, 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 welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Pleased to meet you, Folu.
Yes, very pleased to meet you as well. It's interesting. Again, this is somebody else that I've become like a low-key fan of, because even before this session, it's very difficult to find interviews of Zulu, but you can find them. They're there somewhere. And it was very interesting watching the roundtable discussion between yourself, Nia Kimolayo, Desua, and
right.
as well. Exactly. So that was great. And looking at now, in some of our previous segments, we've discussed how streaming has changed. The audience attention has moved very much to online. So even though in the music industry, audio streaming seems to have gone down, what they're seeing is that visual streaming has gone up. But of course, the industry is also affected by cinemas being closed, the typical ways of interacting with film changing right about now. So I just wonder, just introducing us to that and what this time has been like in the film industry.
Wow, COVID.
Yes, COVID.
I mean, if anyone had told us in 2019 that this is what we're going to be facing this year, I don't think we would even have believed it. But yeah, here we are. It's been very challenging, of course, as you know, because of the restriction of movement and all of that. Productions had to be halted completely. And so, there were people who were in the middle of productions. For someone like myself, Inkblood Productions, we were about to start shooting, we were in pre-production. And, it just halted everything completely. But what we've seen is that because entertainment is still a key and important part of everyone's lives, we're still looking for ways to entertain ourselves. So people have moved online en masse in the way that we've seen a boost in Netflix viewing, Iroko TV, even cable TV viewing. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch. I think what that has done is that it has exposed us kind of, it has exposed everyone to the fact that our content does travel. The people, the responses we get from different continents, about our films has been mind-blowing, has, let us realize that our content actually is sought after. And so, because normally, even when our content is licensed on VOD platforms, it piques the interest of other VOD platforms, and that increases the value of our content. So we're happy with the way things have gone. As we're as much as we can take it, but we cannot wait to get back to productions. We cannot wait to get back to the cinemas. We cannot wait back to get back to what we're used to doing.
Because there is an interesting, conflict there. I like that you've mentioned that, where on the one hand, yes, there now seems to be even more demand for content. People want to watch things. If before people were questioning the interest of the wider world and the diaspora in our content, the truth is, Black people, African people all around the world are hungry for images and stories that look like them, stories that we can recognize that are our own. And that's why it's being consumed so voraciously. But then also something that the music industry has spoken about, and Rima talked about, and I want to address that in Nollywood, is in terms of how much is being lost locally to the industry. We barely have protectionist laws around the film industry, and not to talk of enforcement. There is so much money being lost because of the flouting of copyright laws that do exist, the impunity of offenders, complicity sometimes of the government, institutions, and now with the world, heavily turning digital, again, with the platforms that you mentioned, I just wonder, how will this affect the work, positively or negatively? Are we going to get to a point where we will truly begin to be able to harvest or see the monetization of the work that the film industry puts in, especially locally? Because there's also a separate, I feel like it almost exists in a dichotomy where they're the distributors on the ground who more would have it and making heavy money, but digitally what's happening as well. I would love your take on that.
So the digital platforms kind of actually expose us more to piracy. So what has happened in the cinema, the 5 top studios in Hollywood, all the Disneys and co, Paramounts, and they came together and they formed an initiative called the Digital Cinemas Initiative, DCI. And so they started this thing. It was basically to curb piracy of films that go to cinema. So it was hard, the encrypted formats and the files, everything is safe. Coming into the digital space, it's much easier for pirates to take over. We've suffered pirates. Every single film we have ever released has been pirated. I mean, Wedding Party, we sold maybe 20,000 copies of DVD, legally by ourselves. And pirates made over $5 million on DVD sales of, because remember, it's not just sales within Nigeria, it's also into the African continent, it's outside Africa. And they have more, there's access to content once it comes online. It's harder. But this is the world that we live in now. And I feel like there's the opportunity for everyone to sit up, to buckle up. We need the tech industry involved. We need government fully on top of things to be able to curb, piracy, because what we've realized is really that we can never end it. We have to actually live in a world where we exist parallelly. So, yeah, there are different ways people already, go about curbing piracy online. There are like things like digital rights management. So if you, for instance, if you go on Netflix and you want to download a title, you can download it, but you must still go on the Netflix platform to watch that title. It doesn't go into your phone. I don't even think you can screenshot or anything like that. So there is technology for that already, and that is helping a little bit. But even this Netflix I'm talking about, pirates, I mean, I hear that it's reported that about $197 million is what they lose monthly to piracy. So, there's watermarking, there's fingerprinting. Every other second is like a whack-a-mole game where going on YouTube and we're seeing our movies and we're like, no, take down. We'll send them a take down notice. And funny enough, they send you an email back saying, oh, they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong.
And that's something, again, the music industry spoke about, where there is something with the fans where people expect that if it's online, it should be free, especially in developing countries. There's actually statistics to show that there is this sense of entitlement that I don't understand. So what can be done even within the industry to educate followers that this is not okay, that it actually takes food out of somebody's mouth every time that happens? And we've also got a very interesting comment in here, which I'll just throw in as well, where Dr. Akomolafe basically says, well, why not have your own sort of private crew, pirate crew? If you can't beat them, join them. And while I'm going to modify that a bit to say, if piracy is making so much money, what are the different ways that they're innovating in the pirate sector, so to speak, that maybe legally can be done for owners of films? I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, you broke up a little in between, so I didn't hear you clearly. Can you please take that?
Oh, no, because one of the comments that also came in was, well, why not have your own, pirate crew? That if pirates are making so much money, what can be learned from the challenge of piracy? Because it is almost here to stay. And the internet, as you said, has made it a bit easier. So what can be done to spin that and to pivot it?
A lot of it is not in the control of the producers. So what we do embrace is other avenues to exhibit our films. Okay. So for instance, this is why we at Inkblot, we are cinema producers. We like to produce for the cinema. Everything is documented, there is data, etc. When you're done with that, because you've gone to cinema, there's value in your product. There's demand for your product, and that's the value in your product. And so you can sell to online platforms for a little higher than what other people would be negotiating. So really we learn to, as we try to teach people, in different ways to sensitize, consumers and all of that, it's not a job that we can tackle alone as producers. Remember that there's also all the other things that we have to deal with, all the other challenges we have to deal with in the industry as producers. So yeah, we've learned to kind of live with it, so to speak.
Okay. Chinyere Okere says, well, isn't this where the industry needs to collaborate or partner a little bit more with tech giants? Because piracy is a real thing and it's a global issue. Chinyere believes that in Nigeria, most business people are trying to go about this solo as opposed to having these tech partnerships.
Yeah, like I mentioned, there are the partnerships aren't really in the production of the film. The partnerships are in the battling of the piracy. And there are tech innovations that have come up. Like I mentioned already, digital rights management, the watermarking, fingerprinting. These are innovations. And remember, this is not peculiar to Nigeria. Yes. Hollywood till next year battles with piracy. Bollywood battles with piracy. There were 60-something, I think 62 Bollywood films released in 2019 in the cinema. I don't know how many people actually do go to cinemas to watch Bollywood in Nigeria. But I do know a lot of people love Bollywood. So they do watch maybe ZTV or the Bollywood films that are on Netflix or other VOD platforms. But majority of it we know is pirated. It's pirated content that they're just downloading and watching. So this affects all industries. And there are tech giants and there are tech moguls in every country, on every continent. And it's still been a very difficult thing to battle. So, okay. The thing is, pirates are not they're not in unions.
It's like guerrilla warfare. They're just in their own small cells. They're like cell terrorists.
Exactly. People by themselves are passing out hard drives. People are pirates themselves, and they don't even know it, or they know it.
Thank you for pointing that out. Our hard drive carriers. Everybody sharing hard drive. We're talking to you. We've got Buki Olabi, who is switching lanes a little bit, but still obviously talking about people being able to create a real future for themselves. Says, as a lawyer and movie maker, can you enlighten us on contract negotiations with actors, as some actors complain about their lack of negotiating power with movie makers in the industry? And we know that this is something that tends to make news periodically, where they feel like they have no leverage. I mean, going forward, every person that is involved in the creation of a film project is important to that film project. The sound guy, I think sound is one of the most important areas in film, and I personally, what I think holds back a lot of our films, from really having that global feel to it. But I just sort of wonder, do you feel that these key stakeholders in the industry, do they have enough negotiating power, before they get on a production?
Oh yes, I think that they do, but you see, there are different levels to this thing. So if you're an upcoming artist, for instance, you're an upcoming actor, the negotiation obviously is not as strong as, say, as any veteran, out there. And so, but I don't see that there is any, I mean, it's contract negotiations. If you are coming in as the lead in a role, you get a lawyer to review the contract that you have. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. If it works for you, then you go ahead. I don't see that people really have issues with contract negotiations. I haven't come across, any of those issues myself. So I think.
Well, would I say that some people, do you think that maybe there's an education industry or education issue perhaps within the industry where some people are not even aware that some things can be negotiated or that they can leverage in certain ways? I mean, what would you say to anyone who's watching at the moment who is an aspiring, trying to get into it, trying to understand? Because for a lot of people in the creative sphere, there's been a lot of trial by fire, and you learn on the job. And in our bid to share knowledge and to capacity build, what can we tell millennials who are watching this and trying to figure out if there's a future at all? Because some people started off acting and then pandemic hit, and now they just feel, how am I going to eat? What's going to happen? What can you share with us on that?
So guys, the opportunity is here. Come into the industry. It's open. It's so informal, which, is also a challenge, but it's an opportunity for any upcoming artist in any way. Come into the industry. Yes, you would have to do a lot of personal training, but I feel like the world is open enough where there's so much dissemination of knowledge online where you can teach yourself. These things are free in comparison to going to a New York Film Academy or any of these other places. So, it's really up to you and up to how passionate you are, because this industry still thrives only on people that are very passionate. The things that you see, the things that you engage in the industry, if you are not passionate about it, it will be hard for you to survive. So if you are determined to be in the industry, I say go for it. It's open in almost every sphere, every department in production. You have opportunity to come in there and be creative, be useful, and then the industry just grows on referrals. So once you're great, once you have good character, once you have focus, once you're passionate, once you're great at what you're doing, your referrals just keep growing. And that way, next thing you know, 2, 3, 4 years, there's the sky's the limit for you. There's still growth in Nollywood. Yeah, it's obvious. Sorry?
I love that you say that is true. I can testify, people, is real. But doing the work is important. It is necessary. I know that we've only got a couple of minutes, so just to round up, Philip Adenrele actually asks for just a quick education to educate the public a bit more on piracy, since so many people claim to be ignorant. So in just a few words, who is a pirate? What is piracy? So that people know going forward.
A pirate is someone who makes money off the hard work, the sweat of another creative's product. So in simple terms, you haven't made a film, but there is a film that is available to you, and you decide that you would share it. You decide that you would download it illegally. You would share to all your friends and your friends' friends and your families. And that way we aren't able to get our revenue. We lose revenue from that. A pirate is someone who doesn't care. I mean, it's like drug counterfeiting. It's just that you don't kill us as easily, but you're killing us.
Yeah.
Because
it's a slower death, but it's
sorry?
It's a slower, longer death, but it is still the same thing.
Exactly. I'll never forget a story I heard in like 2014 or so about an American TV series. I think it was called Hannibal. That they had to stop production. They said, canceled because they didn't have any funds to continue. But guess what? They were the 5th most downloaded series on torrent sites.
Wow.
The 5th. So if they had made all that money, they would have continued. But,
wow. Well, Zulu from Inkblot, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and to educate us. Guys, let's try not to be pirates outside, okay? Don't take somebody else's work. And even if you're not making financial gain, the fact that you share it and it is not, revenue is not going back to the creators of the film, to people who are sweating in the hot sun and fighting Lagos traffic to shoot this film that you so enjoy, please help our industry to grow. Zulu, thank you so much for your time.
thank you so much for you.
All right, still here, still winding through. We do have a couple more people to chat with, or a handful more actually. And now we're going to move over to finance and investing. To join me next, Yanmo Omorogwe, who's the co-founder and director of growth at Bamboo, will be stepping in. Yanmo, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well. Thank you, Hartfulu. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I truly appreciate that. I truly, truly do. And now I like that we are moving into the finance, the money aspect of things. When people start talking money, everybody's ears, they open well, their eyes are focused. Now, according to Charles Schwab's 2019 Modern Wealth Survey, less than 1 in 5 of millennials actually have an investment account. In fact, if you talk to people about investing, they tend to think of it as this really far off, distant concept that doesn't really involve them, or that they can only be involved in when they have copious amounts of money. It remains a real challenge for millennials. And I would like to know what you think, in your opinion, Bamboo is doing to bridge that gap, and what millennials and how millennials should be positioning themselves and their attitude towards investing, looking at this pandemic environment that we are in currently.
So just first starting from the Charles Schwab stats, it actually makes sense when you consider that we use the term millennial very broadly, but if you really think about it, the oldest millennials are about 40, 39, 40 right now, and the youngest millennials are about 23, 24 right now. So there's a very, very broad range of people in this. And if you consider the age group here, for this group of people, their first experience or their first, should we say, they're probably your most memorable initial experience of investing was the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Because for the older group of people, they were probably just starting their investment journeys, just in their first jobs. And then, the markets probably crashed with their investments in it. And, there's a middle set that were in college or just trying to start their lives in the middle of a financial crisis. And, for the youngest, a lot of them would have experienced the crisis via various cost-saving measures that their parents were deploying. So it's easy to understand how this could have created a conscious or subconscious lack of trust in the financial markets. And then generally see that it's generally opaque. There is not that much understanding of what is actually going on, what is moving, investing. But what we've seen now, in my opinion, is that as more information has come, as more transparency, we have more apps, we have more things targeted, more and more millennials are interested in various forms of investing. For Bamboo, this was essentially what we thought was most important, that millennials everywhere, starting in Nigeria, had access to invest in everything, access to invest in the US markets, so that we weren't just stuck with only the options we had at home, but we could invest in companies, that we know and we love. Zulu talked about, some movies on Netflix, a lot of us watch Nigerian movies on Netflix. Sometimes it's nice that you can also own stock in Netflix, we're here on Zoom, you can own stock in Zoom and Google, YouTube, that kind of thing. So for us, it was really, really important. And what we're doing is we're making investing very, very easy by trying to break down the various barriers to investing for younger people or people without large sums of money. Because studies also show that millennials are poorer than the generation before us. We have access to less.
I love that you mentioned making investing really accessible, really easy, especially in markets or in companies that we know about, we hear about, but are outside of this market. And that's a very interesting one when you talk about investing in Netflix, for example. The average person or millennial who's listening currently will be like, guy, but I can't even, I can't use my Nigerian card, to sort out Apple Music. How am I going to invest over there? I want to get Tesla stock. It's too expensive individually. How does Bamboo transition? How does Bamboo make that option available to people? Can they buy, like penny stock? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, that's what I was getting to. That for us, that was the most important thing, bringing down the barriers to entry, essentially. So the first thing we have fractional investing. So right now, the stock's trading at $2,000 a share. Not everyone wants to. I mean, at current exchange rates, $2,000 is almost $1 million for one share. For a lot of us, we want access to these stocks, but we're not willing to shell out $1 million. So you can now invest in fractions using Bamboo, which basically means you can buy pieces of a share. So if you only want to invest $20, you can invest $20 and own a portion of the stocks you know and love. And these stocks are in your name. The second thing we then did, because the other barrier to investing once you have the money is just actual access. And what we've done is you can also invest in any currency you want. You can invest in Naira if you're in Nigeria, and you can use your Naira card, or you can do a bank transfer to a Nigerian account. So this way you're able to invest without the barrier of disturbance of having to handle your own FX conversion. So we do all of that for you. And the third thing is we just made it very, very easy to actually get onboarded. You can
sign up immediately. We do ask for your BVN, which we only use to verify you, and it's just an identity verification to check that you are who you say you are. We don't store it or use it for anything else. And once you're on, we can verify your identity in under 5 minutes, and you can get on, fund your account, and be trading as soon as possible. And then finally, we try and provide as much information as possible to help you make good investing decisions.
I love that. That's really dope. And you've mentioned again a few things, especially in your beginning introduction, where you spoke about the volatility that a number of millennials would have experienced through their lifetime with the last financial crisis. And I wonder now with this pandemic, and of course being aware that there is possibly a little bit of lack of trust in the stock market for some millennials. For millennials who are now considering now in this pandemic to invest, I mean, what sort of directions, what would your advice be to millennials who are considering investing? What should they look for? What should they pay attention to? What are the entry-level hacks to investing?
I think the most important thing is invest in stuff you know. So don't follow a trend because you saw someone saying, oh, I bought this and I made money. You have no idea what their investing strategy is. You have no idea what their risk strategy is. So just don't do that. That's probably the most important thing. I say invest in what you know, invest in stuff you believe in, and invest in companies and industries you believe in. I always say the big hack, because there's thousands of companies listed on the US exchanges, and it's hard to know what, but a lot of people probably know what industries they believe in, what you believe is going to be a long-term good play, and go from there. Pick the, if you've decided that, okay, these are the 3 industries you think are poised to make to grow long-term, then pick the top 2 or 3 players in those industries, do a bit of research before you go about investing. And obviously, the most important one is, if you're investing in the stock market, is be prepared for volatility. Prices go up and prices go down. But if you're investing long term, then you shouldn't be too worried about that, as long as you've invested in, like I said, good companies that you believe have long-term growth.
That's dope. A lot of people just want to clarify now that Bamboo is indeed a Nigerian company, not an international company. Because I think when they started hearing international things that you could invest in, they were like, really?
No, yeah, it's a Nigerian company in Nigeria, run by Nigerian people, and we just give you access to the US stock markets.
All right, fantastic. So in terms of opportunities for innovation in your sector, especially for entrepreneurs, do you see any major opportunities in that sector right now for entrepreneurs?
I mean, I guess if you look at the general sector, it's fintech. So there's already a lot happening in this space. And I think there's always opportunities to do more. I think for us anyway, we started Bamboo because we were solving a personal problem. We wanted to invest and it was hard for us to do so. And I think for various people in where there are different financial problems that you're facing, that you can probably think of an easier, more efficient way to do. And it would be just starting. I think just creating more solutions that matter to people as opposed to focusing on ideas that sound mind-blowing on paper, and creating solutions that actually work for the continent and for the people we're serving, I think. But generally with fintech, I would say, there's a lot already going on and there's probably more that can go on.
Okay, so again, just for people who are just wondering, what investment, it really does sound very highbrow, and I think when people have the connotation with a certain word is like, oh, that's not for me, that's far off. Why should our generation invest? Why is that an important thing? Why shouldn't they just bury their money in the calabash in the backyard because they don't really know what financial institutions are doing currently? These are the things that people want to know, because already there's so many unbanked on the continent already. In Nigeria, we know that the majority of people really are actually unbanked. We know that not that many people have access to the sort of internet that we are, or data that we're using up at the moment. So what is the bit of advice for the reasons why millennials should be looking at investments, and why that is an important thing to make sure that we're still a part of global conversations in 20, 30 years?
I think, like I said earlier, when I was speaking, that studies show that millennials were poorer than our parents' generation. That's a fact. And that's because the economic, the most basic one is because salaries, wages just haven't risen with inflation. That, but house prices, etc. have. So for us as millennials, investing is the easiest and surest way to grow your wealth and to be.
And investing is just making your money work for you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was meant by that. Investing essentially isn't something that should sound difficult. Investing just means you put some money into something and you're going to come out with more money than you initially put in. That's literally all it is. Like you said, making your money work for you. And there are various things that you can invest in. But, with questions like this, I like for us to just focus on the facts. And the facts, people talk, when you say investing, people fear, if you use the stock market, for example, people talk, plenty of people have lost money. But if you use the US stock market, the average stock market return over the last 30 years is 10% annually. So if you had put $1,000 in the S&P 500, that's an index. Just if you had put $1,000 in the US market at the start of 1986, you'd have over $30,000 at the end of 2019. And this 30 extra money, and this factors in the fact that you would have lost almost half your money in 2008. And that's another key thing why long-term investing is super duper important, because as your money grows, compounding takes effect. And so your money is able to grow even quicker than you would expect. What I would always suggest for millennials, for young people, really for anyone, is sit down, take a good critical look at your finances, what you earn, and then take a good critical look at what you really need to spend, and then look at what's left over. And out of what's left over, put a small portion aside as money I'm going to forget I ever had, and money I'm just going to ignore and and just put it in investments and just let it continue to grow, let it continue to earn returns. Because eventually you realize that you're making more money and you're able to grow your wealth. Wealth is definitely not created in a savings account, especially if you consider that most savings accounts interest rates are quite low.
Very low. Yanmo, can you share with us website details as well as whether or not Bamboo, the app, is available on iOS, Android? What platforms? How can people get involved with this app?
Yeah, so it's investbamboo.com. And you can find, the App Store, and we're on iOS and Android App Store, any phone you have. And you can find us on social media, same handles, Invest Bamboo. And we also have a community called community.investbamboo.com, where you can also join the conversation, learn some investing tips, tell us your opinion on what's going on in the stock markets.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see. Right, anonymous attendee, we did actually address already the different ways that you can invest. And Yamo was very clear about saying, you know, invest in things that you know, invest in things that you're passionate about, invest in things that you have a feeling will do well. And I think that's kind of important. So she's not going to give you specifically investment advice currently, because you cannot sue anybody. Let me just let me warn you. Yanmo, thank you so much for your time. I do want to ask you if there's anything you want to share with everyone who's watching and paying attention to this right now, that they can use, you know, going forward and really preparing themselves to live and thrive in this time.
I think the most important thing I would say is start. Don't try and time the markets. There's no perfect time to start investing. It's just get started. On Bamboo, our minimum investment is $20. So you can get started with as low as $20. And you know, we have no minimum commission. So no matter how little or how much you want, you can just get started. And yeah, I mean, that's my most important thing. Just start, invest in stuff you know, stuff you like, stuff you think will do well. But yeah, just start. And sorry, my final thing is if you're investing long-term, don't worry when stuff goes down, because think about investing like a swing, should we say, where you have to go back a little bit to propel even further forward. So just believe in the long-term vision, unless something changes fundamentally.
Long-term vision, Yanmo, thank you very much for that. Again, what is the Instagram handle for Invest Bamboo so people can get in touch?
It's Invest Bamboo. So just, yeah, Invest Bamboo, and you can get it.
That's it. Yanmo, thank you so much. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so we are moving on. We're going to switch lanes next to agriculture. I know that there is fashion in the lineup, but not at the moment. We'll get back to that, hopefully, if we can resolve some connectivity issues. But on the line, I know we've got Shola Ladoja, who's the founder and CEO of Simply Green Limited. We are looking at agriculture and how Shola is managing to pivot in this time and what he can share with us about the industry. So Shola, are you there?
So follow.
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. Very good to see you. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. You?
Excellent. So for those of you who don't know, again, as I mentioned, he's the CEO of Simply Green, and Shola pivoted at a time when a lot of people are wondering, you want to be a farmer? What does this mean? What's going on? But Simply Green have made some very interesting steps. And if we look at the context of the African continent, I mean, for years now, in Nigeria especially, we've discussed the need for economic diversification. And now we are met really with the urgency in the face of this pandemic. In 1965, agriculture was responsible for 70% of employment and export cash crops. I think a lot of us will remember in primary school and younger where we were talking about cash crops, this one. But now agriculture accounts for really about 29%, according to latest GDP figures from the National Bureau of Statistics. But I want to know, Shola, how would you say that COVID has impacted this sector for you? What's going on now? What does the picture look like now with agriculture?
Thank you, Folo. Like right now, it's been very tough. I actually know a lot of farmers who have had to throw away their produce because there's no way to transport it to the markets and to the end users. So it's been very difficult on farmers at the moment. Been struggling in these times, especially poultry farmers. A lot of poultry farmers have actually suffered a lot. I know a few more farmers who sell yeah.
Sorry, I think I lost you there a little bit. Sorry, can you just go back a bit to where you talked about poultry farmers, saying that they suffered quite a lot? Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, I know a lot of poultry farmers who have actually suffered during this time. A lot of them have not been able to sell their chickens. It's been a real struggle for a lot of farmers at the moment. But of course, some farmers are actually benefiting from this time. So it's really both ways. It's not just bad at the moment. There are some signs to COVID period we're in.
Okay, so let's talk about those opportunities. How are people able to find opportunities in this time, and how are people able to thrive in this time within the agricultural sector? Who are those that are seeing an uptick or an upswing, perhaps in some of their services or products?
Right. Okay. As for farmers, it's not really that easy for like me to explain, but the different ways you could actually benefit from this time. For example, vegetable farming is going to be something that's going to be very big in the next few months, because we actually bring in a lot of our vegetables from Benin Republic, from Togo, from France and Belgium. So there's going to be a lot of farmers now who can benefit from growing vegetables at the moment. I can tell you that I've benefited a lot during this COVID time in terms of growing vegetables and actually selling vegetables, because a lot of stores before were always saying, oh no, we actually want imported one, we want imported ones. But now that they were not, they could not import stuff, it was an advantage for me to now push my products to those same people who wanted the foreign products, but now they actually can get, so they have to settle for the local products. Find opportunities. There are different sides to agriculture. There is logistics, there's engineering, there's leasing of machinery, there's land clearance. So there are lots of ways that you can actually benefit from agriculture. At the moment, I know a lot of people who have actually gone into logistics, that's moving produce from the farms to the markets and to the end users. I know a lot of people right now who have benefited a lot from that. So there are different aspects to agriculture, but I'm going to say this, agriculture is very difficult and it's very, very, very expensive. You know, they only tell us the side that, oh yeah, you throw the seed in the ground and it just grows. But no, it's all science, you know, it's all science. You have to look at the weather, you have to look at the amount of water, you have to look at pests, so there are lots of opportunities there, but I don't want people to rush into, you know, because farming is the next big thing, as most people say, but it's not. It's not the next big thing. Like farming has always been its thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's always been a big thing, but it does require a heavy amount of investment, time investment, capital intensive, knowledge intensive. And I love that that was a very important thing that you brought up at this time, because on the one hand, even just before the pandemic, we know that we'd seen a rise in investment opportunities in the agricultural section. And I think this ties in nicely from our previous segment. We've seen all sorts of companies come through and people talk about investing in agriculture, but also in this time, in this our conversation, you've already spoken to us about some areas where yes, it could be thriving. I wonder, how do you think millennials can support the agricultural industry to make sure that we are creating thorough infrastructure so that farmers are not having crops rotting and not being able to transport them to where the crops are needed, so that maybe the knowledge gap is being filled a little bit for people who want to get into the industry as a whole. And I know that the sector is quite large, but what are your thoughts on that?
Right. As I said, there are lots of sides to like the sector, but I always encourage people that instead of going into the farming proper, because that's a different side of it, going into the farming proper, I would not encourage people now to do that. But there are lots of ways you can still get into agriculture. You can look at processing. I think about 60 to 70% of post-harvest losses. We don't have cold chains, we don't have cold rooms, we don't have cold vans to move things. So like a lot of things have been grown in the north, like most of our food comes from the north. And when you're moving things from the north all the way down, sometimes it takes 3 days on the road. Most times it takes 3 days on the road. So there are lots of places people can invest in. I know now logistics is a very big side that I can tell them to look into. And also I will look at, there's something I normally tell people when they ask me about farming and agriculture. I always tell them that look at what we have that is wasting. Peppers and tomatoes and whatever. You know, there are different things you actually could do. You could make them into cans, you can make them into stews and pack them for, so there are lots of things you can do in agriculture that does not actually involve you growing the produce, but you need to add value to what people grow. If you take products off farmers that they would throw away normally and you add value to those products, then you're actually multiplying the amount of money that you're going to make. Because in agriculture, the value is in the value addition to crops, if I say that. So when you grow things and you sell it in the markets, you don't really make as much value to what you're growing. That's when the money comes in. I can give you a typical example. For Simply Green now, I was growing kale and lettuce and carrots and beetroots, but the money wasn't coming in as much as I wanted it to. So I started turning them into juices, turning them into ready salads, you know. So that's where the value is. I would not tell people, I would strongly advise young people, don't just think agriculture is about growing the produce. We have enough products in Nigeria, but we have a lot of losses. Let's try to see how we can cut those losses from farms. You can visit farms. You can, like Mile 12 markets. If you go to Mile 12, you see trucks coming in every single day with produce and produce. But most of those produce, they just dump them on the ground and people step in them. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So value addition is a very big part, which I'll tell people to look into.
Value add key. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's very useful insight. We have Ijoma Moke, hello Ijoma, who asks, you know, how do you think that technology can play an additional role in agriculture, especially at this time?
Right. I can give you a typical example of something I've done that's really changed my life. Because my farm is in the middle of the forest, so I have no power from the grid. So I run on solar. My drip tapes, I can control it with my phone, so I can be in Lagos and actually wet my plants. So those are the aspects where I've been able to use agriculture. Also, in different ways, for example, you could start a group of farmers, and you could, a lot of people are not looking into retail. That's what the problem is now. And like a lot of people are looking at, oh yeah, I'll just sell it to somebody that will reuse. But you use e-commerce, Shopify, buy from farmers, you could put up this product on Shopify. That's how you use technology. You could use that to also link farmers and the end users. You don't really have to buy the produce of them, but if you can link farmers and the end users through an app, then that goes a very long way.
Okay. I want to know a bit more about how to get more young people, more millennials involved in adding value in the agricultural sector in different ways, because you saw an opportunity. I mean, you knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but you were, yes.
Like a lot of people in Sholala that I just started agriculture that I've been farming for 11 years.
Yes, no, I know this. This I know. Other people don't know, but I know this.
Yeah.
You know, but what drew you to it? Why did you think that it was okay to make this sort of long-term investment? And bearing that in mind with the reality of the African setting, where the older generation are very controlling, for lack of a better word, when it comes to young people, and without meaning to, without necessarily being intentional, can often, you know, stamp on dreams and very strongly discourage people from going in certain directions. What made it an important thing for you to do, and what helped you to just have that mindset to just drive for 11 years in this direction before you start seeing anything really coming through?
Right. My major drive was I was stubborn. I mean, I just stuck to it. I've always had a dream that, okay, I had a chance to go into agriculture at a much younger age than 50, 60. When I finished from uni, I worked in Nortel Networks, which is now owned by Cisco Networks. And I came back to Nigeria and I was looking for a job in the telecom sector. I went there. I mean, like I had a good CV. They were like, oh yeah, this is great, this is great. But some of them saw my name. They're like, but are you not related to so and so? I'm like, okay, yeah. So I never got the jobs because they thought I was a rebel child, that someone that his family can pick up the phone and call. But that was never me. I wanted to get jobs, but when I didn't get a job, I was going through a very tough phase, and I went to a farm, and I remember I was sitting down outside and I was drinking an orange, and I just kept throwing the seeds in the ground in the same area, you know, when you just take the seeds and they throw it. So I later discovered it like a week after. I just saw all those things growing, so that really just sparked my interest in, oh, okay, I can actually do this. But it was a struggle. I wouldn't tell you it was easy. For 5 years, I lost absolutely every single thing. I actually didn't make 1 naira. I didn't make any money. But why I say I was stubborn was because someone else should have dipped, but I decided to stay and just be stubborn and just keep pushing. The number one thing in agriculture is passion. I'll tell you, if you don't have the passion, don't even bother going into agriculture, because those plants are like babies, you know, like the plants don't watch themselves, the plants don't, you know, you have to look after them. So those are the babies, like there's no day off, you know. You leave at night, you come back, you sit at box of eating every single thing. So it's going to be very difficult when people get into culture, but you need to have a passion for it. And in the less stressful sides of processing, you can actually go into agriculture in line of processing as well. Take produce and process them into finished products. There are people now that are making yam flour and you know, like corn flour and like a lot of stuff. So people can actually do that, but I will tell you that you need to have the passion for it, and and just be stubborn and just keep going.
I like that. Be passionate, be stubborn.
Because I remember my mom was always calling a pastor cousin of mine. Yeah, like as in just tell Shola just to go and get a proper job. This one that is going to the farm, you know, is in the sun, he can fall sick. But I just stuck to it, and trust me, that's the best choice I've ever made. I wouldn't do anything in my life right now but culture.
We have a few comments and questions that have come through. Tade Fatinko says, is the Bank of Industry doing anything to help farmers? Because, you know, he imagines that you may have had some kind of startup fund, but what about those who don't have startup fund? Just before Shola answers you, Tade, I will say that he did mention that agriculture is such a huge sector. You don't need to be a farmer. Farming isn't the only thing that's there. But is the Bank of Industry doing anything to help out farmers?
Yes, the Bank of Industry is doing a few things, but this Shola must have gotten funds. I have not gotten 1 naira from anybody. I have not borrowed 1 naira from a bank. I've not borrowed 1 naira from any company. Every single money I've used in agriculture has been my money. I throw back every single thing I get, throw back into the farm. Because my father was told me something about when it's time to invest. You don't invest except you are at a certain point. Because if you bring people in to come and invest on your farm and you don't have a clear picture of what you want, don't know if it's the follow. Follow. Okay.
Yes, then they have some kind of my internet connection.
Okay.
See.
So like a lot of people just think you have to invest. Like if you get money from somewhere, I can guarantee you're going to lose your money. You're going to lose it because farming is not so simple. Like farming is a science. You know, you need experience. But if you have the experience, yes, and you have a solid plan, you can go to the Bank of Industry, you could go to the Bank of Agriculture, you could look at international agencies that give grants to farmers, but be very careful when you take funds for agriculture because a lot of my friends I know have collected money, and trust me, 6 months they've all packed up. Most farmers I know, I can say 95% of farmers I personally know have packed up. So yes, let's just be very careful when it comes to funding.
Okay, with funding. Thank you so much, Shola. Thank you for being so real, for keeping it 100 with us. So it is not to say that it's important. So it's not to say that, you know, oh, everything's going to be great and it's rosy, you know, just spit in the ground and some things will grow up.
But trust me, if you do it right, it's such an amazing thing, and it's the best job. It's the best job ever I can ever wish for. And yeah, I believe if you do it right, you will definitely rip a lot from agriculture right now.
Excellent. Shola, thank you very much for your time. Truly appreciate you. Just before you go, please share with the good people how they can get in touch with you, Simply Green. And if you haven't tried the juices, guys, I can personally testify to the greatness of the juice.
She is one of my biggest customers. So I can tell you that she is one of my biggest customers. So she can testify. You can go on our website, is simplygreen.farm, simplygreen.farm. Not .com or anything, just simplygreen.farm. You can reach us on Instagram at simplygreen.farm. Send me a DM any single time. If you have any questions about agriculture, you can send me an email, shola.ladaja@simplygreenjuice.com, or you could just drop a message on the website and I'll get back to you.
Excellent. Shola, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everyone who is listening, who's been attending, who's been with us since the beginning. Those of you who just joined partway through, we are still having a millennial conversation on creating the future post-COVID-19. And so far, a lot of really useful insights have been shared with us. We've seen the important link and correlation between agriculture, tech, education. Everything is really tied in. And it really requires us as millennials to actually buy into this, to pay attention and understand that this idea that we're waiting for some hero leader to show up and save us is false. It's not going to happen. If we don't get involved now and start investing now in the segments, in the sectors that we believe in, seeing how the businesses are moving, it's just not going to make sense. So I just thought I'd just put that in because I'm very passionate about that. And people like Shola doing the very hard work of toiling for years without necessarily seeing money show up. So also, if you're here to just jay and how you can make money fast, perhaps this is not the platform for you. We're capacity building here. I will move on now and talk about more finance, cryptocurrency. I believe that Tomiwa Lashe-Bikon is in the building. He's the co-founder and head of product for Bitcoins Africa. Tomiwa, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you. Great to be chatting with you today. How has the pandemic season been treating you?
It's sort of been a struggle, sort of getting motivated, ensuring everyone feels safe, and especially with our employees and with family, that's sort of been, but it's not been too bad. Just trying to ensure everyone stays encouraged and everyone feels safe.
Okay, so talk to us first of all about cryptocurrency. Talk to us about what Bitcoins is. When people hear cryptocurrency, again, there is a tendency because of connotations associated with this thing, like, man, this sounds like hacker behavior. I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if I understand that. So what is cryptocurrency? Why are you involved in that space at all? And how does Bitcoins plug into that?
Sure, absolutely. So for the most part, cryptocurrency, I think right now when people think about it, you think about money, right? So if you want to engage in any financial instrument right now, you need what you would describe as a centralized authority. So maybe like a central bank or a bank to tell you, oh, you have X amount of money and you can transfer it to someone else. Or the idea around cryptocurrencies is, well, what happens if we are able to remove that middle person, right? What happens if you don't have to go through a bank for you to transact or for you to move value around? Or what happens if there is sort of like a publicly available ledger that keeps a record of everybody's transactions? And in that kind of situation, right, you can think of that as, at least right now, synonymous to a global currency, right? Because then you don't need so many central banks or so many different banks having to talk to each other, right? Individuals, right, from the comfort of their houses can effectively transact, right? Because all of that information is publicly available.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. That's interesting. So how can the average millennial get into cryptocurrency, and how does Bitcoins help that happen?
Sure, absolutely. So for the average person to get into it, you just like the most popular cryptocurrency right now is Bitcoin. And that's actually what Bitcoins does, right? Bitcoins enables people to buy and sell crypto, right? So if you have even a small amount of money, like 1,000 euro or something like that, right? You could download the Bitcoins app, right? So Bitcoins is a cryptocurrency exchange, and buy Bitcoin. And at that point, you sort of ask yourself, like, what can I do with this? Like, why is that valuable? Yeah, exactly. So there are two ways to think about this, right? So one is if you wanted to send money outside the country, right? You could buy Bitcoin, send it to someone outside the country, and they'll sell it, right? In that kind of scenario, right? And like you sort of see this with families trying to pay their kids' tuition, for instance. You don't actually have to go to the bank, figuring out opening a domiciliary account, figuring out all of the complications around that, saying, oh, there's a minimum you can buy, and all of those things. Or if you're a freelancer, right? So there are a lot of our users who are freelancers. And what they do right now is instead of having to worry about how they can get paid from outside the country, they just accept Bitcoin, and you can sell Bitcoin for Naira. So exactly. So like when you think about the concept of having a global currency, right? The same way you would have a global internet or a global WhatsApp, and there isn't like a geographical border around that. The answer really is, well, what can we do when there isn't a geographical border around the movement of money?
Okay, so I like that. So very practical applications really for cryptocurrency. Being able to, it's like universal currency. You can trade it, for whichever currency it is that you now want to spend in locally. But a lot of people do still have very serious questions about cryptocurrency. For example, Chinyere Okere says, again, is crypto viable and is it sustainable long term? What else I would add to that is that who regulates Bitcoin? Who dictates the value of that? So that the user or the buyer doesn't feel that they might be losing value somewhere along the line.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'll start with the second question, right? So which is who regulates crypto? So right now, no individual entity regulates crypto, right? Everybody who takes part in the system just sort of coordinates behavior, right? So you sort of think of this as similar to the internet, right? We don't really ask the question, or we don't think who regulates the internet in the same way in which you might think who regulates sending text messages, or who regulates sending like a mail, right? Or things along those lines, right? There are government institutions that regulate all of those things. But then with the internet, and similar to cryptocurrency, right? Just the infrastructure that everybody is able to tap into, right? Does not in itself need regulation, right? There are already rules of behavior that you sort of can engage in. So in the same way with your Chrome browser, you don't think, oh, can I send money in Chrome or something, right? Like the rules of what you can do are already implicit. So in that same sense, right, the rules of what you can do are implicit, and there is no extra need for regulation. Now, in the kind of scenarios where there might be things that we want to coordinate socially to do, right? So again, if there are sort of in quote upgrades that happen with the internet, there's a lot of dialogue that happens in the background. Everybody can engage in that dialogue. But then for the most part, for most of us, we don't care that much, right? As long as we can go about our daily business and do whatever we want to do, we are sort of fine, yeah. And then the first question about whether or not it's sustainable. I think, so there are two aspects to that question, right? In terms of how people use Bitcoin right now and other cryptocurrencies. So one is in terms of the remittance play, right? Where people are trying to move money across different borders. Like that seems infinitely sustainable, right? There is no restriction around that. For as long as you exist and as long as you have a global world and an internet world, all of those things are going to happen, right? The second application is sort of people who are in quote speculating, right? You sort of want to hold money in Bitcoin in hopes that it's going to appreciate, right? There's a little bit of risk around that, but then again, from the observation and when you really think about Nigeria, that's risk that everybody for the most part is very much used to, right? In the sense that when you think about, say, the Nigerian stock exchange, right? Like it has fallen 20% through the year, right? And things along those lines, like we're used to Naira depreciating. And so that kind of risk exists, but then the implicitness to it is also the fact that there is also AI reward, right? So and that's something that like people can take advantage of, right? Because as millennials, a lot of us are asking like, what can we do with sort of the little money that we're beginning to make, right? So you don't sort of need to put all of your money into crypto or anything, right? But for people who are interested in thinking of it as a store of value or an investment tool, right, there is that play, and like there's a high reward for the risk. Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
then perhaps what we should be delving, I think, even more into is the knowledge aspect, of understanding crypto. So with physical Naira or even with digital transfers, like you said, there's some rules that you understand. When you look at a certain Naira note, whether it's real or whether it's fake, institutions that you can transfer money with online. So when it comes to cryptocurrency, how does one know that they're not being taken in by a crypto pirate? Or, how do I know it's not fake? Like what's real, what's not, what are the safety, what knowledge will further guarantee the user's safety?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So I'll answer that with two aspects. So one is, I think very similarly to a lot of things we do in regular life, or in a sense, I guess referrals and conversations and feedback from other people influence how reliable we think certain things are, right? So if I wanted to eat in a restaurant, for instance, right, like I don't know beforehand whether it's useful, right? But then based on what my friends say, right, I can make educated decisions. And so it's very similarly, right? We sort of we build a social sense of like what we think, okay, like what can we invest in, right? So when most people ask me like, okay, I want to get started with crypto, what do I do? I'm like, buy Bitcoin. I don't tell them about all the other 200 different currencies, right? Because in that sense, right, there is a building sense of like what you can do and like reliability and trustness around it, right? And like say, for instance, with Bitcoins, right, our exchange, that's one of the things that we very actively try to do, right? Where we try to-
Sorry, with what? Go back.
With Bitcoins, our exchange, the company, my company, yeah. We put ourselves out there to say, okay, like you can trust us, right? If you want to get started with Bitcoin, if you want to get started with cryptocurrencies, like come to us, ask us all the questions you need, right? And in that sense, right, like we have a lot of resources also. We publish like a course online that people can go through and get a basic understanding of like, okay, what's Bitcoin? How do I get started with this and things along those lines. So pushing a lot more around the education front, right? I mean, like Bitcoin is really young, just 10, 15 years old or thereabout, right? So like really pushing aggressively on the education front, right? We think is important. And like that's a lot of the things we've tried to do, right? Where we've said, okay, how can we close the knowledge gap? How can we help people feel more comfortable? How can we ensure that the best practices in the financial sector are being undertaken so people feel comfortable getting started here?
Okay. We have an anonymous attendee who asks, what is the future of Ethereum in the cryptocurrency market? I'm assuming that is a type of cryptocurrency, Ethereum.
Yes.
Okay. What is that? Why is that even one to talk about at the moment? And what is its future?
Okay, sure. So right now with Bitcoin, for instance, right? I mean, Bitcoin is almost people are very familiar with, right? With Bitcoin, you can move money across borders. That's the fundamental application. With Ethereum is sort of a way of saying, well, how can I think about like the software applications I have without it being controlled by any one person, right? So it's sort of similar example we do right now. There's a lot of conversation around social media, like, or Twitter, Facebook, or moderation of content and things along those lines, right? But then when you sort of have a decentralized platform like Ethereum, you don't have to think so much about all of those things because the openness of all of these things means there isn't any one person that censors anyone, right? And there isn't any one person that can prevent somebody from doing whatever it is they want to do. You sort of need to ensure like there is a social community, like deciding whatever you want to do. So in that same sense, that's sort of how you think about Ethereum. In terms of the future of Ethereum, I guess my personal opinion is Ethereum is probably here to stay. At the very least, the use cases that you see with Ethereum are here to stay. So an example is something like what's called a US dollar stablecoin, right? So right now, if you
called a what? Can you slow down and say that again?
A US dollar stablecoin.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and I will explain what that is. So right now, if you want to get started with the US dollar, right, you ideally go to a bank, right? And then the bank will say, oh, the minimum we're going to take from you is $100, right? And you need to bring all of this paperwork and you need to come and sign and all of these things. And you sort of get frustrated. And you want to do a wire transfer and they say, oh, give us $50 before you can do a wire transfer. And you get even more frustrated. But then with Ethereum, right, like what we've seen people do is build what's called US dollar tokens, right? So a US dollar token is basically a digital representation of $1, right? So instead of you holding a dollar physically, right, you just have a dollar value on the internet. And with that, right, you can think of it as you effectively own $1, right? Because there are a lot of people around the world who recognize that as $1. And there are a lot of people who are willing to transact with you and assume that that's $1. right? And so like that serves the function of like a $1 money. So we increasingly see all of that like with user behavior and what with people getting started with crypto, where they think, okay, how can I hedge against inflation? How can I hedge against depreciation? How can I get some exposure to something related to the dollar? And they do that. So those are the kind of applications you can build on Ethereum, and those are the kind of things that we see people do.
Okay, several questions are flooding in because obviously this is money and this is digital money conversation. So you know there are a lot of questions. And first of all, are you on Instagram?
I hope I'm answering them all.
What is the Instagram?
No, I'm on Twitter.
Okay.
I'm on
what is
Twitter,
it?
yes.
What is it Twitter?
Alephile. I'll send it on the chat probably.
Is it the Bitcoins? Is there a Bitcoins official handle as well?
Yes, there's a Bitcoins one also. It's Bitcoins_Africa. So Bitcoins is BUYCOINS. Bitcoins_Africa.
Perfect. Now, Tade asked a great question and says, well, if you store your cryptocurrency in a digital wallet that is provided by a particular company, and then that company goes out of business or is hacked, what happens to your money?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so right now, if you store your cryptocurrency with a company and they get hacked, like you lose your money. But then there are sort of two aspects to that, right? So one is, again, the more reputable a cryptocurrency business is, right, and the more reputable a cryptocurrency exchange is, the more reliable you can feel with it, right? So we sort of see all of those movies where, like, even for banks, people would like hack banks, right, and like people move money, especially with like Swiss banks and things like that. So like there's always that risk level, right? But then that's one of the reasons why, like with us, right, with Bitcoins, is like, okay, how can we adopt the best industry practices? How can we adopt all of the security guidelines? And there has been a significant amount of global thinking that has been put into this, right, to ensure like all of this is well guided. So that's sort of the first thing, right? Like there's that level of risk across board, right? And like that's not in any way unique to cryptocurrencies. But then you can feel safe when you know that the exchange you're using, right, like Bitcoin, for instance, is like trusted. That's one. The second thing is like with storing money, there is an option to not store your money or your cryptocurrency with an exchange, right? Like, so that's one of the beautiful things around cryptocurrencies, right? So the same way you have cash and you can keep your cash at home and you don't have to go to the bank, you can do something similar, except for the fact that now you're storing it on your phone and like nobody can really touch you. Yes, so in that same regard, yes.
So you don't have to go down the speculative road where you're just holding on to the cryptocurrency. You can simply use it as a mode of transferring across geographical borders and then convert your cryptocurrency back into something that maybe you have a bit more faith in or has a bit more regulation, but holding it with the hope that it will just increase value. That's where the speculative aspect of that comes in. Is that correct?
Yes. So again, as with money, right? Like money serves those two purposes, right? The store value purpose and like the usage for transfer, and like you can use crypto for any of those two. Yeah.
Exactly. Great. So we've got Chinyere Okere saying there is a rumor about crypto because, you know, it feels like scamming in Nigeria, that people's passwords corrupt easily and they lose their business. How true is this? You know, do big players in e-commerce recognize and use cryptocurrency? Big players being, for example, Amazon or Alibaba.
Okay. Yes, there are big players that do use cryptocurrency. So Microsoft, as an example, I think up until recently, you can pay for like Xbox credit and like all sorts of things on the Microsoft store with cryptocurrency. So like, yeah, there are a lot of places that adopt that. We see a lot more of the adoption like in the US and in China, right, and less so in Nigeria, right? And again, for us, that's one of the challenges here, right? Because we need to be able to build the infrastructure to encourage people to get started and to encourage people to begin to see the advantages of this and use it effectively. So yes, I forget the first question. What was the first question again? Or the first part of the question?
First question is just passwords corrupting easily and losing business. Is that true that there's a rumor about that?
That's definitely an exaggerated rumor. Again, like if you use a very safe exchange, right? Like you're verifying, if you have a strong password, like you're fine. Again, just the kind of regular precautions and security you will take in real life. Yeah, crypto enthusiasts have not done a good job of like communicating that all of this is fine and safe. You don't have to get too worried, right? Just live your regular, normal internet life.
Okay, a couple of users ask, anonymous attendee and Damilola Akumalafe asking about Golem in crypto. Is it a reliable future investment? What is Golem for those of us who don't know?
Okay, so I probably won't go deeply into that, right? Golem is one of the more speculative cryptocurrencies, right? Again, for the practical sense of like most people and like what most people are interested in, yeah, that's sort of not too, that's a little too niche.
Okay. Clearly, anonymous attendee is either a part-time hacker or very deep in the game. Asks quite a few questions about whether you think it's best to mine Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin. Which would you advise is best, and whether or not this discussion could be linked at all to blockchain technology, and looking forward and how that could help the entire industry actually.
Okay. So one, this isn't investment advice. I feel the need to say that. Yeah, people say it a lot on podcasts, so I think it's right I say that. But I don't. It's probably best to buy Bitcoin and not mine. For you to mine, you need a lot of computers, and like it's very expensive to get started. You need a lot of electricity. You need a lot of cooling technology.
Just for people who don't know, mining Bitcoin is basically just going digging for gold. But virtual.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for helping me say that. Yes, but yes, that's exactly true. Yeah. So you, again, for the most part, if you're getting started with crypto, and except you have like a gazillion $1 million and all of those things, you probably don't want to worry about mining.
Okay, I like that. And just to round up, because I think we are coming to the end of this, can you give us the difference between Forex trading and cryptocurrency trading? Is there any real difference, or is that difference, does it lie again in terms of protections that exist and regulations that exist in one industry over the other?
So I'll think of that more in terms of usage, right? Again, with Forex trading, the vast majority of people engage in Forex trading is mostly as a speculative thing. It's like, okay, is the dollar going to move against the pound and things like that? And you do a bunch of leverage things on top of that. With crypto trading, like that's significantly different, right? With crypto trading, you're really just thinking, can I move my money into something that feels a bit more secure, right? People like to describe Bitcoin as digital gold, for instance, right? So when you think about gold, you're thinking very long-term reliability and things like that. Like Bitcoin has been here for a decade and is the best performing asset, as an example, right? So when people go engage in crypto trading, like one, that's the category of things they're thinking about, right? Where it's like, okay, because crypto is very scarce, or like Bitcoin is scarce and it's effectively like gold, can I just store my money and expect it to increase? And then the second thing that happens with crypto trading is people who just want to use it practically, right? I'm a freelancer and I want to receive money from outside Nigeria. My family is in Nigeria and I want to send money to them from Houston and I don't want to have to go through the banking system. Things along those lines are why people use crypto, and that's for the most part what crypto trading involves.
Okay. Tomiwa, you have been most educational in this segment. Thank you very much for that. But is there anything you want to leave, again, our attendees and participants with in terms of thinking of opportunities that crypto presents for millennials, especially over the next decade plus? And of course, to get to put information as to how they can reach buy coins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Again, just to iterate one, you can feel very safe and secure when you get started with cryptocurrencies. It's just like most things on the internet. You don't have to get extra paranoid, just take regular safety precautions. If you use Bitcoins, you're especially very safe. So that's one. The second thing is you can think of crypto as being useful in two regards. One is if you want to move money across borders, you want to move money between Nigeria and China, right? So there are a lot of people who pay for goods in China, for instance, and are beginning to use cryptocurrency, right? You don't want to worry about going through the legacy banking infrastructure, and you just want to use something digital, use something that is very easy and you can track, you can use Bitcoin. And if you, the third point is just if you want something that gives you the opportunity to grow your wealth and removes sort of the depreciation risk that comes with the Naira, you can get started with Bitcoin, you can get started with US dollar backed stable coins and things along those lines. So that's really just sort of the 3 points. One, security. Two is moving money with foreign remittances. And three is growing your wealth.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tomiwa. For those of you that want to know whether or not buy coins are on Facebook, I believe that they are on Facebook. Is that correct? Is buy coins on Facebook?
Mostly on Twitter, @bycoins_Africa. Yeah, we do have a Facebook page, but it's not as active as our Twitter page. Yes.
Yes. I know there's a page because I tagged them online.
Yeah. Okay.
But they're So please do that. Thank you so much for your time. To everybody that's attended, we truly appreciate you. It's been a fantastic millennial conversation on creating the future post-COVID, hosted by Oando PLC. Now, the hashtag for this conversation, should you want to share any aspects of it, and I really encourage you all to do, because this is all about sharing knowledge to empower ourselves for a better future. Please make sure that you use the hashtag Oando Webinar Series. Follow Oando, of course, on their different platforms, Oando_PLC on Twitter and Instagram, and Oando PLC on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. This video is being recorded on YouTube. So for those of you who are wondering whether or not you can get a link to this, it is being recorded. It's currently on YouTube streaming, and I believe that you'll be able to go back to YouTube to rewatch this and get involved in different aspects of what we've spoken about again today. I think that's a very important thing. I personally want to remind you all that this is just the beginning of even more conversations to come. Don't forget the hashtag Oando Webinar Series. Make sure that you complete the survey post-event. So as soon as this event is done, there will be a little link for a survey that pops up. And we ask you to please indulge us with a few more minutes to kindly complete that survey. It's to make sure that we are giving people as much useful information as is possible, so that when the next set of conversations come around, that they are tailored and suited specifically to you. And on behalf of Oando PLC, I have been your moderator and host for today, Folu Storms, and I want to thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope that you go on to have a fantastic, fantastic day and a great weekend. I've personally been educated quite dramatically, but until I chat with you again next time, it's goodbye for now. Thank you very much.